Chapter 253. In the fog, the black-haired boy stared at the blood-red name that suddenly changed the environment. Although he couldn't see the person clearly due to the fog, just the name alone was enough to cause a huge impact on Luoya. Roy Akot. This was an unforgettable name for the Akot family. It represented one of the most prosperous periods of the family. Vincent's era was too far away from the present. In the past few hundred years, the Akot family leaders had tied the glory of the family to Roy, the chosen one. Luoya could be said to have grown up listening to Roy's stories since he was a child. Luoya, who understood Roy's journey, naturally knew that this ancestor had also studied at St. Freya Academy. However, there were no records of the specific situation in the Akot family. As for encountering such a thing during the opening ceremony, Luoya thought about it before, but he didn't care. There was no other reason other than the probability was too low. St. Freya Academy had been established for more than 900 years, and the number of ring-bearers was estimated to be more than 1,000. The possibility of encountering a family member was negligible, and it was still unclear whether Roy was an ring-bearer or not. From a certain point of view, Luoya's thoughts were correct. He didn't encounter Roy through the normal channels, but it was obvious that the current situation was abnormal. The return after defeating the ring-bearer didn't trigger, but instead seamlessly connected to the hills and plains. Recently, there were strange fluctuations in the mysterious realm. Chris's words echoed in the boy's mind, and Luoya immediately became alert. The mysterious realm only had one effect on the Night of the Devil, and that was to nullify death and injury. Then after the fluctuations, would this function still exist? Luoya didn't know the answer to this question, and he didn't want to use his life to verify it. He stared at the blood-red light that represented the killing intent, and almost reflexively, the curse power exploded. Sensing the threat from the outside world, the Ghulandair and Paitila had already made their move. This feeling. It's also the crown. Little guy. Get behind me. A hoarse and dignified voice and an anxious female voice came one after another. Ghulandair's huge body appeared at the forefront, and the giant snake made of rocks used its body to encircle the youth. The two ancient gods looked forward at the same time, and under everyone's gaze, the fog that covered the figures finally dissipated slowly. Under the fog, a young man with long black hair appeared. He was tall and slender, wearing an old-fashioned suit from a few hundred years ago. He wore boots, and there were a few medals of honor pinned on his chest. His long cape and black hair fluttered in the breeze, and his golden eyes shone like stars, adding a layer of dignity to his slightly weak face. It even gave him a feeling of finishing a dragon. So beautiful. When the fog dissipated, Luoya felt the most direct and truest feeling in the bottom of his heart. The black-haired youth was stunned. He never thought that Roy Akate, the ancestor of his family more than 300 years ago, would actually kill him at first sight in this unknown secret realm. His black hair fluttered in the fog, and a strong sense of danger and a weak face complemented each other. This sharp contrast and unique temperament brought Luoya a shock that was almost comparable to Ai Lizzie and the others. From the medals on the chest of his clothes, when Roy obtained the shadow, he should have been attending a grand ceremony in the academy, so he didn't bring any weapons. This was undoubtedly good news, but with the bloodline of the Akate family, whether or not he had a weapon didn't affect his combat strength much. Luoya stared at the figure in the distance with a myriad of thoughts in his heart. As if sensing Luoya's gaze, the black-haired youth raised his head slightly. The moment the golden eyes met, Luoya's pupils contracted slightly, and he suddenly had an extremely wonderful feeling. At the same time, Paitila's shout suddenly sounded. Not good. Don't look at his eyes. Mother Earth reacted quickly, but it was too late. The moment he looked at Roy's eyes, Luoya's consciousness seemed to float out of his body, and there was a sense of unreality. His movements and expressions seemed to freeze at this moment, and his curse power rapidly decreased. The light on his body was extinguished visibly. The shouts of Ghulandair and Paitila could not reach his ears. The bodies of the two ancient gods disintegrated as Luoya's curse power contracted. When the breeze blew again, there was nothing around the youth on the hill. On the other side, the black-haired youth also stepped forward and strolled in the direction of Luoya. Illusion. This was an ancient curse that had existed since ancient times. But with the passage of time, the ancient fantasy creatures gradually died out, and this terrifying curse gradually declined as it was lost. The scariest thing about illusions was that they were silent and hard to break, especially when the enemy was alone. The ancient illusions were the curse of death, burying the enemy in the blink of an eye. Ranks were meaningless in front of this ancient curse, and the effect of bloodline was minimal. Illusion was an examination of one's heart. Whether it was a high and mighty god or a mediocre mortal, they were all equal. At this time, Luoya had fallen into a long dream. At this time, Luoya was sitting in a seat in the cinema, staring at the constantly changing screen in a daze. The soft seat made him feel very comfortable. The surround stereo sound had a sense of sophistication, and the fragrance in the air was relaxing. Luoya's mind was blank, like a disc waiting for content to be recorded. The constantly changing image in front of him was the data, and the youth naturally began to watch it. It was a short but long story that belonged to the youth alone. The realization of his own fate, the pursuit of the cultists, the mountains of corpses on the streets of the holy capital, the blood on the deck of the ocean, the destructive disasters and unknown enemies, and difficulties appeared one after another, as if there was no end to them. Looking at the busy youth, Luoya could not help but think, this should be enough, right? How long more do I have to work hard? It's almost time to rest. Chapter 254. On the hill, Roha Akit's golden pupils stared at the shadow of his ancestor from hundreds of years ago silently. After the fatal genjutsu was broken, Roy's genjutsu no longer had any effect on him, and the boy's return ceremony officially began. Frozen Earth. Amidst the majestic voice, the curse power in Luoya's body exploded into the sky along with the wave of frost. The majestic life force began to transform into a booster at the critical moment, causing his strength to rise steadily. In an instant he had reached the peak of Source Level 3. When Luoya broke free from the illusion and found that he was still on the plains and hills, he understood that this was no longer the gentle and refined demon encounter night, but an unknown place where one would truly fall into death. Therefore, the young man did not hold back at all. At the same time, two huge figures wrapped in curse power appeared angrily. The roaring giant swung his fist the moment he appeared, and the eyes of Mother Earth emitted a fatal light as she stared at the enemy. The meteorite-like fist fell from the sky, and the legs that touched the ground were quickly petrified. In addition to the pincer attack, there was also the frost that seemed to freeze the world. All the attacks arrived at the same time, and the situation Roy was facing could be described as hopeless. However, despite having such an obvious advantage, Luoya's expression did not show the slightest carelessness or relaxation. It was only because of the Akat family's bloodline that he never fought alone. Amidst the buzzing sound of the air vibrating, thousands of rays of light suddenly rushed out of Roy's body. The petrification effect of Paitila disappeared in the light. As the light wings spread out, holy and majestic energy soared into the sky with a tall figure. When Luoya saw the figure, his gaze instantly turned solemn. An angel. Not a person with an angel bloodline like Nuair, but a real angel who served Shia in ancient times. The light that went against the flow rushed toward the fist of the Gulen Daer, but that was not all. After the angel, a deep beast roar sounded. Roar! Amidst the howls that shook the surroundings, a giant wolf that looked like a phantom appeared out of thin air. His body seemed to be weightless as he floated out and landed on the ground before turning into a solid form. The phantom wolf ran towards Mother Earth, and behind it, the long-haired youth's body was already wrapped in bright flames, creating a huge conflict with the surrounding cold air. On the dusky ground, the roars of beasts mixed with ice and fire could be heard. The giants and angels were wrestling, and the flames of war were everywhere. The deathmatch in the mystic realm was still going on, but outside the mystic realm, it was a peaceful scene. The students who participated in the preliminaries were eliminated one by one due to their defeats. They were led out of the misty forest by the guide sprites. Some people were dejected as they looked at the guide sprites that were not as bright as the lights, while others were in high spirits as they looked at the sprites that were much brighter. Regardless of whether the results were ideal or not, the admission ceremony that belonged to them was over. The teachers and senior students began to record the results of the freshmen separately, while more people were silently waiting for this year's finals to enter and face the shadow of the Sentinel. Everyone was curious as to how many geniuses would be able to survive in the new year. However, in the Mystic Realm monitoring room, the teacher's attention was attracted by something else. The wave value is rising, it's still rising. It's going to break through the second warning line. Damn it! What the hell is going on this year? What the hell is going on? The roars of the monitors echoed in the room, and the entire monitoring room was in chaos. It was hard to believe that just 10 minutes ago, they were still drinking tea and chatting. The Mystic Realm monitoring room was a department in the academy that was specifically responsible for monitoring the stability of the Mystic Realm, such as the Night of the Demons, ensuring the safety of the Mystic Realm, and assessing the danger level. For many years, the team had completed their tasks well and had rich experience. However, today an unprecedented emergency suddenly struck. The Mystic Realm, which should not have caused much fluctuation according to the combat standards of the freshmen, shook violently in an extremely short period of time. At first, the monitors did not think much of it, and only sighed at the strength of this year's freshmen. However, the moment the wave value broke through the first warning line, and did not turn back, everyone's expression changed. The last time the wave value broke through the first warning line was not too long ago. It was just 2 years ago, when the Purple Rose Lily's battle caused a violent tremor on the Night of the Demons. However, even the fluctuations caused by Her Highness the Empress battle only caused the wave value to break through the first warning line for a few seconds. But now the wave value was rising steadily. It's already broken through the second warning line. It's still rising. It's still rising. This wave is not something a student can cause. If this continues, the Mystic Realm will explode. Roars and shouts echoed in the room, and everyone's brain nerves were oppressed to the point of dizziness. The stability of the Mystic Realm was related to the special effect of the Night of the Demons. Once it completely collapsed, the freshmen who were challenging the Guardians would lose their lives and become invalid. And now, the students who were challenging the Guardians were the Princess of St. Maister and the daughter of the President of St. Louis. If anything happened to them, quickly inform the emergency department. No. The monitoring room director, whose face was as pale as paper, trembled as he thought of this. He slammed the table and gritted his teeth as he shouted. Activate the Level 1 emergency alert. Go directly to the Dean. Chapter 255. What was the most important thing in a battle? Was it hot-bloodedness? Was it bravery? Was it perseverance? No, neither was it. Luoya felt that the most important thing in a battle between transcendents was calmness. The timing of the attack, the degree of power needed, the target's trump card, and the possible price to bear. Everything needed to be measured in advance. From all these perspectives, Roy Akat, the ancestor from hundreds of years ago, was the most powerful opponent Luoya had encountered so far. Since awakening his bloodline, Luoya had never felt that he could lose to someone of the same level. But there was no doubt that Roy was an exception. The two of them had their own advantages in different fields. Unlike Luoya, who had spent his life to reach source level 3, the beautiful ancestor in front of him was a true source level 3. His understanding of his curses and bloodline was also at source level 3, and his application was far stronger than Luoya's. The evidence was the golden crown fragment that strengthened the ancient gods, which was a skill that Luoya had yet to master. But in comparison, Luoya also had his own advantages, and that was the strength of the Gulandair and Paitila. Whether it was the King of Giants or the Earth Mother, their strength was obviously higher than that of the ancient gods opposite them. Even after being strengthened by Roy, the two sides were only evenly matched, so the outcome of this battle was destined to be Luoya's side from the beginning. The black-haired boy stared at the ancestor, who looked even more beautiful under the reflection of the flames. That delicate beauty made it difficult to distinguish between a man and a woman in the night, and it had a unique neutral temperament. Unfortunately, Luoya did not have time to appreciate the ancestor's magnificent beauty now, so he focused his gaze on the raging flames on his shoulder. The moment the boy saw the flames attached to Luoya's body, he understood that the ancestor in front of him actually had 3 ancient gods following him, but the third one had not fully appeared yet. Instead, he cooperated with him to use the flames to fight Wuxia. There was no doubt that this was abnormal. The full combat strength of the ancient gods was worlds apart from the current half-baked situation. In fact, these flames could not completely offset the frost of the frozen soil maker. In the previous intense collision, Wuxia had turned the other party into an ice sculpture more than once, but every time he killed Roy, he would be reborn like the mystic wolf in the sky. Immortal body. When this phrase appeared in Wuxia's mind, he was close to despair, but soon reason prevailed. There was no such thing as immortality in this world. This kind of power that defied common sense must be accompanied by harsh conditions and costs. This was Xia's iron law. There must be something that he had overlooked, and that was the key to victory. With that in mind, the black-haired young man carried out a large number of experiments. After defeating his opponent several times, he had a complete train of thought. Why is Roy willing to take a beating and not release this ancient god of fire? If it is to resist Wuxia's frost, it is completely putting the cart before the horse. According to the nature of this resurrection, there is no doubt that it comes from the ability of that phantom beast. So what is the use of this flame? Stretching out his palm to release the frost to block the huge flame fist, Wuxia looked at the ancestor below again, and a flash of realization appeared in his eyes. It's the shadow. The role of the flame is just a cover. What Roy really needs is a light source. This is the condition for his infinite resurrection, and the reason why he did not let the ancient god of fire appear and leave. Countdown to skill, 19, 18, 17. There's only one strike left. Feeling his vitality, the black-haired boy muttered to himself. After more than 10 seconds, Wuxia would fall back to level 4 of the source rank and enter an extremely weak state. At that time, even with the protection of 2 ancient gods, he would almost certainly die. The only way to survive is to win. Wuxia's golden eyes lit up as if they were ignited at this moment. In the silent silence, the most powerful attack so far arrived in this secret realm. When he stretched out his hands, the entire space seemed to be controlled by the gods. It quickly became hazy in the vibrations, and the collision of the frost and the air created a white mist that spread like an explosion, and then circled around the two of them. The white mist above the plane was like a tornado, and the huge momentum and terrifying spell fluctuations attracted the attention of all the gods. The angel in the sky stopped the entanglement of the spell, and the phantom beast landed on the ground again. The Mother Earth straightened up and looked anxiously, and the huge skeleton could not help but turn its head. All the strong people present understood that the real battle was about to decide the winner. Under the cover of frost, the black-haired boy's hands faced each other, and the waves of disaster converged into a frost-like heart in his palm. Heart of frozen earth. This was the product of Wuxia's year of using the attributes of the frozen earth creator's crown stone to the extreme. The resplendent heart was like a work of art, but the small creation represented the eternal frozen earth calamity. The moment it appeared, Roy, who was wrapped in flames, suddenly stopped. The shadow person looked down at his chest with a stiff expression. In front of him, Wuxia's palm also grasped the light, and then suddenly clenched it. Chapter 256. On the plain, 2 youths who looked somewhat similar fell to each other, and in the distance, the ancient gods fighting collapsed and left one after another. Holding the saint's dagger in his hand, the black-haired youth was covered in wounds, but there was a faint smile on his face. It had to be said that although his injuries were miserable, Wuxia was in a good mood, and even had a unique sense of accomplishment. When Wuxia started this round of attacks, there were only 10 seconds left before the end of the skill. At that time, there were still 2 possibilities for Roy's immortal body because theoretically, there were 2 ways to eliminate the shadow. One of them was naturally to completely extinguish the light source. As everyone in this world knew, there would be no shadow without light. The other was a concept that did not exist in Xia. There would be light without shadow. If it was the first situation, then Wuxia had many ways to restrain the other party, such as blocking the moonlight with a thick fog. But after thinking about it, Wuxia felt that the possibility of using this method to break the immortal body of the ancestor was not high. There was no other reason. It was too simple. As a hero of a generation hundreds of years ago, how could Roy's life-saving skills be so simple? If it could be broken so easily, then Luoya felt that it would not be as useful as his weakened immortality. Therefore, Luoya was prepared for the second situation when he attacked. And the second requirement of completely erasing the other party's shadow was indeed much more difficult than the first. How could a person eliminate a shadow? There were probably not many people in Xia who could give a perfect answer to this question. Even though there were many uses for shadows in curses, there were none that could eliminate shadows because shadows did not have the nature of curses. However, Xia did not have any research in this area, but Luoya had something in his previous life that could roughly do it. The shadowless lamp was an important invention of the medical field in Luoya's previous life. It was mainly used in surgery. The principle was to reduce the umbra by using many light sources. It was not truly shadowless, but it was enough. Although Roy's skills were powerful, just like the laws of this world, powerful skills had harsh activation conditions. And facts proved that Roy's immortal body could not be activated with the invisible shadow under the dense light. After the initial death illusion, the competition between the ancient gods, and the personal battle, Luoya finally won and defeated Roy, who was at the source level higher than him. Even if this Roy was a fake without enough intelligence, this was enough to make him proud. The real Roy would probably hide the secret of immortality better, and conduct a certain degree of verbal interference and inducement. TSK, what a monster! Luoya sighed in his heart, and tried to sit up with his arms propped up. However, before he could take a breath, a voice with a hint of laughter behind him made his body completely stiff. Don't say that. I'm a little sad. Under the night breeze, Luoya looked back at the thin figure standing behind him and fell into a daze. There was only one question in his mind. Why did he speak? As a shadow person in the secret realm, Luoya was completely sure that Roy, who fought with him before, did not have a consciousness. Or rather, all the guardians in the secret realm did not. It was because of this that they lost to the proud sons of heaven, who were at the level of source level 4 despite their strength. But now, the fake in front of him spoke, and most importantly, the expression in his eyes changed. Luoya looked up at the black-haired youth's helpless but somewhat warm eyes, and could not help but gradually widen his eyes. There was no doubt that the person in front of him was a real person with a conscious personality, and this inexplicable sense of intimacy. It was the real Roy. You. Luoya pointed at the youth in front of him, and did not know what to say. On the other side, Roy sighed slightly. Although it's just a doll with my skills, I didn't expect it to be defeated. Should I say, as expected of a descendant of the Akate family? What's your name? Luoya. Luoya? The long-haired youth sighed. He looked at Luoya's young face with complicated emotions in his golden eyes. He was only at the level of source level 4, but he could do this, and those two ancient gods. Roy looked at the descendant in front of him and narrowed his eyes slightly. Although it was not much, he still had a slight impression of the shadow person in the battle. Not to mention the magical refraction formation that Luoya used to turn the tables. The two ancient gods that followed him were far beyond Roy's expectations. Even in the Akate family, those guys were not easy to find. In the end, it was very difficult to collect relics. But if one did not collect relics, the risk of blindly drawing was very high. Because compared to collecting relics and having a certain amount of authority, blindly drawing with bloodline required one to talk to the ancient gods, and the ancient gods' standards were generally very high. Chapter 257. On the plain, the black-haired boy looked at the old ancestor who was patting his shoulder, and fell into silence with a stiff expression. The wind was blowing, and the grass was flying. The wound on Roy's chest was bleeding, and Luoya was looking at his bright red lips, thinking about a question. How can you use such a cute face to say such dirty words? Ancestor, what did you say? I said to make a woman from the Aikman family pregnant. Okay, don't say any more. Luoya stretched out her hand to stop Roy's next words. She pinched her eyebrows, feeling a headache. Didn't you leave a message on Cade saying, don't trust Aikman? Indeed, I have the same idea now. But what does impregnating an Aikman woman have to do with trusting their family? Of course it has something to do with it. Luoya glared at the calm Roy, her face red and speechless. Impregnating her? Isn't that the same as getting married? If you don't even trust her, how can you get to that point? You don't have to get married. Cough cough. I mean, you have to think about it yourself. Roy hurriedly changed his words under the gaze of his descendant. For a moment, he felt a headache coming on as he looked at Luoya. Obviously, this descendant of the Akate family was better educated, had a higher moral standard, and had a higher sense of responsibility. He probably wouldn't impregnate someone without giving her a proper status. Roy was actually quite satisfied with this. After all, good moral character was the foundation of everything, especially as an awakened of the Akate family. Having a dirty heart was equivalent to giving enemies a chance to attack, and sooner or later, he would die an unnatural death. However, although having a good moral character was good, it was a disadvantage for the mission Roy gave him. Observing Luoya's blushing face, Roy couldn't help but shake his head slightly in his heart. Looking at this shy look, he probably hasn't even held a girl's hand before. Roy looked at Luoya, who was snatched by the girls every day, and his heart was filled with worry about the Akate family having no descendants. However, what he did not know was that Luoya did not hold hands much, because he was usually the one being held. Looking at this youth who didn't reveal anything and didn't take the initiative to attack, old ancestor Roy felt a headache coming on. Without a doubt, as a member of the Austin Empire's royal family who believed in the pure blood theory, it was unlikely that the women of the Ackerman family would have a good impression of the men of the Akate family. They might even be on guard against them. If Luoya was a veteran in the field of love, it would be fine. But he was so inexperienced, how could he? Roy, who couldn't think of a good solution after thinking for a long time, was extremely anxious. In the end, he couldn't help but grit his teeth and stare at Luoya. I don't care what method you use. I just want you to have a child with Aceman's blood. If you can't get it, then I'll just snatch it away. Roy, who had given up on his plan, was rather helpless. He didn't think that Luoya would work through normal means, but fighting was a different matter. In his eyes, Luoya couldn't pick up girls, but fighting was very good. As the saying went, use one's strength to attack the other's weakness. If he couldn't get it through normal means, then he could only snatch it away. As long as he succeeded, the Ackerman family, who was thousands of miles away, could only suffer in silence unless they went to war with the theocracy. Of course, the Akate family wouldn't be able to leave the country in the future. This matter didn't require any precise emotional manipulation. The only difficulty was whether he could successfully snatch it away. Roy was very confident in Luoya on this point. She was just a woman from the Ackerman family. How strong could she be? Roy grinned and scoffed at the Ackerman family's combat strength. However, he didn't see Luoya's dull expression when she heard his good idea. Snatch Lilith Ackerman to be the wife of the fort? You're really a clever little devil. Luoya looked at her ancestor, who had an expression that said, "This isn't difficult at all." She really wanted to ask him, "Ancestor, why do you want to end your line?" Lillian Ackerman was a genius who had reached third source level at the age of 16. If Luoya remembered correctly, Roy had also reached third source level at the age of 16. Most importantly, unlike the previous retarded version of her ancestor, Lillian had an extremely high IQ. If Luoya really used her skills to fight with her, there were basically only two possibilities. Lillian killed Luoya, or he accidentally killed Lillian. The two possibilities were equally likely. There was no other way. Based on the strength that Lillian had displayed previously, Luoya would die if he held back. However, if she used her full strength, all of Luoya's moves were basically killing moves that couldn't be saved. After hesitating for a long time, Luoya still didn't tell Roy that this woman of the Ackerman family was a peerless genius. Instead, she asked another core question, which was why Roy wanted Luoya to marry a woman from the Ackerman family. However, she didn't expect Roy to shake his head at this question. Chapter 258. Is he gone? On the plains, the young man who was gradually recovering held the ring in his hand and looked at the light spots floating in the sky. For a moment, there was an indescribable sadness in his heart. Although he knew that Roy was no longer in this world, leaving only a trace of his consciousness, and the two did not talk for a long time. The closeness that originated from their bloodline, the same goal, and the same purpose made him identify with Roy, and Roy did not hide his kindness to him. In the end, Akot still had too few blood relatives. He was alone in almost every era, not to mention that Roy was also an awakened, a blood relative that transcended generations. It had to be said that Roy's prodigal personality that did not match his heart left a deep impression on him. But Luoya could clearly feel the sense of responsibility under that frivolity. His appearance provided Luoya with a lot of clues that could no longer be found in this era. And the help he provided was indescribable. From Vincent to Roy, and then to Luoya, the three awakened bloodline of the Akot family were like a relay, peeling off the historical truth layer by layer, eager to find the truth, change the current situation of the family, and their own fate, and even seek the stability of the human community. Perhaps Vincent and Roy did pay the price with their lives in this process, but their efforts were not in vain. Luoya, who inherited the information left by the two ancestors, would continue to explore. Perhaps one day he would also encounter a desperate situation, but even so, he was not willing to give up. The result of 1,000 years of accumulation could not be destroyed in his hands. This was Luoya's will, and also his thought when he received the Black Rose ring. All the side effects in his body disappeared, and the spell power that was consumed by the explosion was replenished as if time had reversed. Even his torn clothes gradually recovered. This surreal scene made Luoya realize the magic of the Night of the Demon again. But then again, Roy actually used his own shadow to protect the ring. Didn't this mean that he did not want to give it to anyone? How could a freshman deal with such a pervert like him? Or was this a screening mechanism, and only the awakened bloodline of the Akot family who defeated his shadow would be able to make him hand over this important clue about the scholar? With peace of mind? If that was the case, then his ancestor must have cheated in order to keep the ring a secret. Luoya looked at the two rings in his hand and secretly guessed. Soon after, he shook his head. No matter what, it was more important to get out of here as soon as possible. Thinking of this, the young man called out to the guiding spirit in the sky. When he realized that the fatty couldn't find his way for a while, he sighed helplessly and reached into his pocket to light Chris's lamp oil. Then he followed the guidance and walked out. At the edge of the dense fog forest, chaos had just ended. A large number of elites from the emergency department were evacuating in batches. Dean Antonio was also observing the situation nearby. Chris stood on the rooftop and looked in the direction of the forest. He heaved a sigh of relief and prayed that Luoya would be fine. Everything happened after the preliminaries. When the freshmen were challenging the shadow of the Guardian, the Demon Knight suddenly began to fluctuate violently. At one point, it was close to the final warning line, and was about to collapse. In the face of such an emergency situation, the Secret Territories Monitoring Room activated a Level 1 alert. The school's emergency department was dispatched in full force, ready to rush in and save the freshmen. One must know that the challengers now were not the ordinary aristocrats of the past. They were the Nuwa Iyer princess of the theocracy and Miss Seraphia Rose. If something really happened, the implications and the depth of the impact would be unimaginable. In fact, the atmosphere at the scene was extremely solemn. The old director of the monitoring room had a heart attack on the spot, and was directly carried away by the school doctor. Fortunately, this violent fluctuation only lasted for a short while before it disappeared. Dean Antonio seemed to have grasped some inside information, and did not seem to be worried about it. After the secret realm stabilized, everyone's nervousness gradually dissipated, and the Night of the Demons once again returned to its original trajectory. At this time, in the periphery of the misty forest, there were thousands of freshmen and seniors who had just come out. They were waiting for the results of this year's competition, or rather, for the birth of a new ring-bearer. Among them were the nobles of the theocracy and Rose, freshmen who were waiting to ride on someone's coattails, seniors who were not doing well, and even a large number of gamblers who were waiting for the lottery to open. The opening ceremony this time could be said to be the gathering of expectations from all sides. Not only were the theocracy and Rose waiting for their leaders, but the freshmen were also looking forward to the birth of a new force. After all, St. Freya Academy currently had a ring-bearer in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th years. Ideally, the freshmen would have a ring-bearer as well. Otherwise, It would be difficult for the freshmen. The ring-bearers' exclusive training ground and exclusive buildings were all shared by the faction. This was a substantial benefit, and there were countless hidden benefits such as connections within the faction. If the first years did not have a ring-bearer, then they could only compete with the second years for the Green Roses quota. It would be much more difficult to compete with the seniors for a job. Time passed by as everyone waited in anticipation. In the temporary room of the security department nearby, a black-haired girl clutched her chest with a depressed expression beside an overturned cup. Since the fluctuation of the mysterious realm began, Lillian's body had a strange reaction. She could not calm her restlessness at all, and it was getting more and more intense. Originally, as the bearer of the purple rose ring, Lillian should not have come here. After all, the king would not meet the king, and paying too much attention to the new ring-bearers would make her seem weak. But an inexplicable anxiety led her to come here. What was the reason? Why would the fluctuation of the mysterious realm affect her mood? And what's with this feeling of losing something important? Lillian frowned, her eyes full of confusion. But unfortunately, this anxiety of feeling that someone important was in danger was destined to be a feeling that she, who had never experienced much familial affection, could not understand. And just as Lillian was vexed, footsteps gradually sounded in the misty forest. The freshmen who challenged the shadow of the sentinel returned one by one. But unfortunately, most of them were sighing in despair. Suddenly, a strong fluctuation of spell power appeared, guiding the light of the elves to shine in all directions. After a moment of silence, the crowd waiting nearby realized something and suddenly let out a shocking cheer. The victors had returned. Chapter 259. When the brighter guide spirit rushed out of the forest, the senior students who had witnessed the entrance ceremony several times almost reflexively cheered. The guide spirit was not only a guide, but also a tool to score points in this mysterious realm. The brighter the guide spirit was, the more curse power it absorbed, which indirectly meant that it defeated more and more powerful enemies. Now, the light of the guiding spirit that floated out of the forest had expanded to the point where an adult could barely fit it. This was something that the previous guiding spirit that was only the size of a basketball could not compare to. And this level of light also represented the birth of a new ring-bearer. With the crowd's excited gazes, the silhouette of a person walking out of the dense fog forest gradually became clear. Not long after, a young girl with reddish-brown hair and emerald eyes strolled out under the gazes of tens of thousands of people. Then, a burst of exclamation resounded from the crowd. It's Miss. It's the girl from Ratchet's side. As the crowd clamored, Xia Luo walked out of the misty forest with a smile. Her beautiful eyes quickly scanned the crowd, and when she found that Luoya was not present, she sighed in disappointment. After the fierce battle, the girl hoped to see the appearance of her sweetheart welcoming her. In fact, Xia Luo had already thought about it. If Luoya was here to wait for her, she would let Luoya put the ring on her finger. Although Xia was not like Luoya's previous life, where different fingers had different meanings, just putting a ring on a lady's finger was enough to show the intimacy between the two, just like the ancient practice of giving daggers to each other. Generally speaking, this kind of behavior would only happen between lovers. But man proposes, God disposes. Xia Luo did not expect that her sweetheart, who she thought would quickly defeat the shadow of the sentinel, would come out later than her. Maybe he met someone difficult to deal with. The reddish-brown-haired girl thought and sighed. St. Freya Academy had produced many talents for thousands of years, and it was normal for there to be a few ring-bearers who could fight or who were good at delaying battles. What's more, they were all fighting above their level, so it was understandable that they would come out later. Of course, Xia Luo also had another acquaintance who did not come out, such as a certain Miss Angel, but it was obvious that the reddish-brown-haired girl did not want to see her at all. Shaking her head slightly to get rid of the disappointment in her heart, Xia Luo raised her hand in front of the crowd, and the curse power flowed into the ring in her fingers. The next moment, a sparkling red light bloomed in the exquisite rose-shaped ring, followed by the crowd's cheers and thunderous applause. It's the red rose. We have the red rose. Oh, long live the miss. As Xia Luo showed off her rose ring, The crowd below was completely immersed in excitement. The nobles on the rose side cheered, and the freshmen breathed a sigh of relief. The teaching staff talked with each other, admiring the talent of the Sorofia family's Mississippi. Although the Sorofia family had been famous for a long time, because their main talents were focused on divination and astrology, and because the family's inheritance was cut off, the Sorofia family had only produced one ring-bearer in 100 years, and Xia Luo was the second. It could be said that she had won glory for the whole family and made the Rose nobles proud. The cheers at the scene continued, and Xia Luo was surrounded by people. All the freshmen wanted to leave an impression on this ring-bearer of the same level, especially the seniors who failed to achieve their goals. However, before this wave of cheers subsided, a new guide sprite rushed out of the forest, causing a second round of exclamations in the crowd. That's a new guide sprite. Someone else came out. This one is even brighter. The noise and discussion exploded when the second guide sprite appeared. There was no doubt that this guide sprite with a brighter light could only mean one thing, and that was that another freshman had successfully defeated the ring-bearer's shadow and obtained the ring. Under the expectant gaze of the crowd, the blonde Miss Angel successfully appeared. The light in the fog became brighter and brighter, and in the next moment, Nua Ire, with a pair of wings of light behind her, flew out of the forest and soared into the sky. Amidst the exclamations of the crowd, she slowly floated down with the guide sprite. At the same time, she stretched out her hand and showed the rose ring on her finger, which was emitting a golden light, to the crowd. The golden rose. Another ring-bearer. Shia above, long live the princess. Another round of applause rang out. The students of St. Mestre in the academy shouted and waved the national flag, while the students of the Austin Empire were more indifferent. Overall, the freshmen were still in high spirits, and the entire forest was filled with a celebratory atmosphere that was different from the gloomy fog. Nua Ire also frowned as she did not see Luoya during the process of landing. She looked at Xia Luot, who was surrounded by people on the other side. When she saw the red rose ring on her finger, her gaze became slightly vigilant. In the end, she still got it. But forget it, it was expected. The blonde girl withdrew her gaze. Now that they had obtained the ring, Nua Ire and Xia Luot, as the future successors of their respective countries, should not quarrel with each other. Instead, they should communicate with the students of their own countries and accept their congratulations. It was necessary to communicate with subordinates and use honor to enhance the cohesion of the team. This was something that the leaders of a group had to do. However, now that they were carrying out their duties, they had to divert some of their attention to silently observe the situation in the forest, waiting for the person of their dreams to appear. Others might not be familiar with Luoya, but Nua Ire and Xia Luot had experienced the historical journey with him. They were fully aware of Luoya's combat strength. The Guardian's shadow was only a weakened version of the Source Tier 3. It was not a threat at all. The two victors were full of confidence in the young man, but on the other side, Chris was a little anxious. She could not help but light up another cigarette. As an old single woman who had not spoken to her seniors for more than 10 years, Chris had been holding back for the entire afternoon. But she still could not think of what to say to Kadia. After careful consideration, she realized that the only thing that they had in common was Luoya, and Luoya's entrance exam was no doubt a good place to start. Chapter 260. In the square outside the forest, the crowd had already fallen into a frenzy. 3 ring-bearers. This was the highest number of ring-bearers in the same batch in the history of St. Freya Academy. The last time 3 ring-bearers appeared in the same batch was more than 100 years ago. In the square, the financial staff of the academy looked at each other. The birth of 3 ring-bearers at the same time meant that the academy would have to fork out a large sum of money for subsidies, and their workload would increase by a lot. For the freshmen, this was undoubtedly great news. Just like when Luoya's previous life's campus recruitment, there was a giant company. And it turned out that this company was indeed a giant. The oversized guide sprite floating in the sky, its size far exceeding everyone else's, could only mean one thing. And that was that its owner had defeated an enemy whose strength was beyond imagination. And in the eyes of the guild leaders and the academy's mentors, this was what was truly worth paying attention to. Chris looked at the guide sprite with a dull expression. If she remembered correctly, according to the records, the largest guide sprite in the history of the Academy's entrance ceremony should be about 3 meters in diameter. And this white sun now, without even looking, knew that it was far larger than the record. A genius. A genius with a limitless future. And a local noble, the kind that could be pulled in. At this moment, the old men on the various platforms who were previously dispirited all became excited at the same time. Their waists were no longer sore. Their legs were no longer painful. And their hunched backs could be straightened. Almost at the same time, the 8 immortals crossed the sea, each showing their magical powers, and rushed over with all their might. The guild leaders were very anxious, but the Academy's mentors were even more anxious. Joining a guild was up to you, and there was a lot of uncertainty, but if a student wanted to find a mentor, it was a matter of fact. With Luoya's ability, it was almost certain that he would become famous in the future, and when that time came, it would definitely be beneficial to the mentors themselves. The guild members and the Academy's mentors came down one by one, but at this time, Luoya did not care. The youth was experiencing an unprecedented feeling, bathing in the cheers. It had to be said that whether it was in Akat Hill, the holy capital, or Rose, Luoya had never experienced such grand cheers, let alone the elites of the same age from St. Freya Academy. It was the highlight of his life. It would be a lie to say that he was not happy. It was better to say that he was very happy. But at the same time, Luoya did not forget the 2 girls who were waiting for him. Surrounded by the crowd, Nua Iyer and Xia Luot smiled at the boy. Because Luoya belonged to the Church of Saint Maester, and was a close neighbor of the United Nations, the students from both sides had a good impression of him. Among the crowd, Paul was also squeezing forward, wanting to congratulate his friend first. I didn't expect that the random person I met on the way to school would be such a big shot. My school life should be much better than I imagined. Paul sighed in his heart. He followed the freshman who wanted to be the first to leave a first impression on Luoya. But after looking around, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. Why are there so many girls? Sensing something, Paul slowed down his pace. On the other side, Nua Iyer and Xia Luot, who were surrounded by the crowd, suddenly became serious. They stared at the blushing girls in the crowd and clenched their fists. It started again. It started again. After Luoya obtained the rose ring and received attention, a large number of vixens had appeared due to the huge exposure. They were starting to form groups. Faced with this situation, the 2 girls naturally wouldn't let it go. They waved their hands and immediately gave the order to stop them. However, what they didn't expect was that before the 2 girls' subordinates and the crowd of freshmen rushed in front of Luoya, a group of old men suddenly descended from the sky and surrounded the black-haired boy. This student, I am the representative of the Transformation School, Richardson Herman. I don't know if you know anything about our Transformation School. If you are willing, how about I show you around our headquarters tomorrow? Don't listen to him. I am the representative of the Energy School, Powell. The Transformation School is something only sissies learn. A real man's romance is only explosive. Nonsense. Only a monkey without intelligence would rely on brute force. Transformation is the choice of a wise man. You people from the school, please make way. I am a regular teacher. This student, what do you think of potionology? I am a potionology lecturer and mentor, Pierre Ogre. I think you are very talented. Of course he is talented, but it is definitely not potionology. Luoya, I am the mentor of curse protection studies, Frank. I think you should know that the most important thing in a real battle is always your own life. If you can defend against it, you won't need potions. Extremely stupid. Do you think potions can only be used for treatment? There are many times when a man needs potions, not just on the battlefield. In front of Luoya, who had yet to react, the old men from the various schools met on a narrow path. The professional mentors of the academy were also enemies on a narrow road. All kinds of persuasion and cursing filled the black-haired boy's surroundings. As more and more old men and women flew over, the scene was a little out of control. The school leaders who had never interacted with each other, and the mentors who had grudges gathered around Luoya. The war of words between them became more and more intense. If there was a disagreement, it would become a war of words and let Luoya see who was better in actual combat. Noelle and Charlot were dumbfounded at the chaotic scene. The freshmen who were rushing over did not know what to do. There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. Amidst the group of seniors in the air, the black-haired youth was exhausted from dealing with them. He felt more tired than when he fought with Roy previously. The square was crowded with people, and on the top floor of the building temporarily requisitioned by the security department, the black-haired girl behind the curtain was silently looking at the boy who was being robbed. It seems that he is safe and sound. Lillian Aikman thought so and suddenly realized that the turmoil in her heart had calmed down. The girl thought for a while, but still could not figure it out. She could only shake her head and look out the window again. Although Lillian had long expected that Luoya, the 3rd ring-bearer, would appear, she had to admit that Luoya's strength had exceeded her expectations. With the rise of this new star, the number of first-year ring-bearers would occupy half of the academy. Their influence and strength would expand in one breath. Don't get close to the Akate clan. The girl had to admit that she could no longer fulfill this order. Under the friction between forces, Lillian and Luoya's contact was inevitable. Chapter 261. A week later, St. Freya Academy's Commercial Street, Broken Sword Tavern. At dusk, the commercial street was bustling with people. The doors of Broken Sword Tavern were constantly opening and closing. With the increase in popularity, the tavern had a lively atmosphere. The sound of wooden cups clinking could be heard constantly. The owner's greeting and the aroma of wine filled the air. In the corner of the 2nd floor, a young man in a hooded cloak looked at the smiling red-haired woman in front of him. "I say, Teacher Chris, is it okay for you to bring me to this kind of place?" Aren't you an adult?" "That's not the problem." Luoya's Akate carefully looked around. At this time, the sun was setting, and the number of customers in the tavern gradually increased. The single customers at the bar were chatting and tasting wine, the 2 seats against the wall were chatting and laughing, and the new customers were curiously looking at the collection on the wall. Broken Sword Tavern, as its name suggested, was a tavern decorated with hundreds of broken swords on the wall. On the outside, it was an inconspicuous building made of stone and wood, but in the commercial street of St. Freya Academy, which had existed for hundreds of years, it was very famous. It was said that the owner of this tavern was a swordsman who lost all his companions in an adventure. He was also seriously injured and could no longer go on adventures. Disheartened, he returned to his former academy and opened this tavern. He kept the broken swords that had been with him for many years, and placed them on the wall to show that he would never leave and move forward together. The owner's behavior was praised by many knights. Since then, this tavern had a rule. If the owner was willing, he could hand over the broken swords to the tavern, and give the retired swordsman a place to stay. After so many years, there were hundreds of broken swords, and each one had detailed information next to it, and even a message from the original owner. Of course, this kind of secret and low-key tavern was basically impossible for new students to find. In fact, most of the people who entered the tavern were returning customers, senior students, teaching staff, and other staff of the tavern. This made the black-haired young man under the cloak greatly relieved. "I'm afraid of being seen, and it might cause trouble." Sighing helplessly, the black-haired young man reached for the cup on the table and took a sip of wine. The pale blue ring on his finger flashed under the dim light. The blue rose was probably the most popular term in St. Freya Academy. Ever since the entrance ceremony a week ago, Luoya's life had sunk into another level of fierce battle. On the 2nd day of the opening ceremony, after the official award ceremony, Luoya was besieged by various schools, student organizations, and the academy's instructors. Blocking the door was a common occurrence. Various temptations were offered, and some even tried to seduce her. Of course, this kind of insensible trash was immediately eliminated by the 2 new ring-bearers, the Golden Rose and the Red Rose. But even so, the academy was still in turmoil. The dormitory that Luoya was assigned to this batch of new students was heavily monitored every day because of him. And in the dormitory, there was an endless stream of people who wanted to establish a relationship with him. 1 week after the entrance ceremony, St. Freya Academy gave the students time to familiarize themselves with the campus, choose the subjects they wanted to study, and report the course allocation. During this time, the students could choose one of the academy's instructors as their instructor. It was a bit like choosing a class teacher. 1 week seemed to be a long time, but considering the thousands of students choosing their major, the academy collecting their wishes, reporting and sorting, allocating teaching resources according to the situation, and a series of other things, 1 week was considered fast. And for Luoya, this week was the most aggressive week of the academy's instructors. Because he was not familiar with the schools in the country of scholars, Luoya did not want to get involved in this field. As for the issue of instructors, Luoya naturally chose Chris, who gave him the lamp oil so that he could return safely. And from another point of view, Chris was indeed one of the best choices as the academy's sage instructor. It was just that it was not appropriate to say this out loud, because it would bring a lot of trouble to Chris. So in the past few days, Luoya had been wandering around through the relationship between the theocracy and Rose. He was quite jittery these days. Looking at the blue Rose who had caused a sensation in the academy a week ago, but was now a little scared because she was blocked at the door, the red-haired woman could not help but laugh. I know you've been chased by those old things recently, so I brought you here to relax. After all, you'll be my disciple after tomorrow's announcement. Chris was in a good mood as he drank a mouthful of wine. He was very proud of his action of looking for Luoya in advance. He didn't mention his original purpose of looking for trouble. As expected of me. The woman nodded and crossed her arms proudly. Then she pointed to a corner of the wall. Of course, there's another reason other than relaxing. I brought you to this corner for that. The black-haired youth followed Chris's hand and looked to the side. In the next moment he couldn't help but be stunned. On the wall next to Luoya, a slender broken sword was hanging on the wall. Looking at the style, it should be modern. Because of the maintenance spell, it didn't look old. Instead, it looked like it had just been broken. At the bottom left of the sword holder, there was a line of simple description in small print. In November of the year 988, it broke in the ruins at the foot of the Fu Air mountain range. With this sword it saved 3 people. Kadia Akat. The first time I came to this tavern, it was my senior who brought me here. Now you know why I brought you here. Chris smiled and looked at the broken sword on the wall. Her face was full of nostalgia. Opposite her, the black-haired youth was already dumbfounded. What's going on? Senior? My father? Wait, could it be that before? Luoya looked at teacher Chris who was opposite her. The conversation between the two of them a week ago started to appear in her mind. Her face couldn't help but gradually become strange. That. Teacher Chris, how's your letter coming along? What's the content? Chapter 262. Ringbearers were, to some extent, the highest position in St. Freya Academy. They were an honor that the students earned with their own strength, and could not be stripped away. Compared to them, even the dean could be replaced. Of course, the dean could only be replaced in name. In reality, it was impossible. Even if Antonio were to get Alzheimer's from today onwards and dress up as a woman and go square dancing every day, it would take a year and a half to replace him according to the normal procedure. As the Blue Rose who had the highest grades in history, and fed the guide elf the most, Luoya's treatment was naturally not bad. In fact, when the academy gave this record holder his own building and training ground, he was given the choice to choose. This kind of right to choose was very comfortable. St. Freya Academy provided Luoya with many choices, but there were 3 that were the most tempting. The first was a tower in the main campus, the second was a villa complex by the lake, and the third was a manor by the mountain far away. In terms of area, although the tower was tall, it had the smallest area nearby. The manor included the forest beside it, so it was much larger. The largest was the villa complex by the lake. As long as he took it, the whole lake would be Luoya's. But as the saying goes, quality is more important than quantity. In terms of land value, every inch of land in the central campus was worth gold. It was the busiest area in the vast St. Freya Academy. The food street was so close that it could be seen with the naked eye. The commercial area was also very close. All kinds of campus activities were held here. and it had a somewhat urbanized feel. Without a doubt, with this place as the base of Blue Rose's faction, he could fully enjoy the life in the academy. He could go downstairs and eat the food from the specialty stalls in the campus. He could immediately know about the discounts in the commercial area. He could participate in campus activities when he went out, and watch concerts when he opened the window. Every day, he could sleep in until 10 minutes before class started. This was the ideal campus life for many students who lived in remote dormitories. With convenient transportation, one could enjoy one's youth to the fullest. If it was in his previous life, Luoya would definitely have bought this place on the spot. However, in Xia and St. Freya Academy, a training ground related to supernatural powers was also a very important factor. In this aspect, the tower was not suitable. It was obvious that a large training ground could not be built in this central area. On the other side, the villa complex by the lake was much cheaper, but the accommodation conditions were the best. Basically, it was a single small villa with a beautiful view of the lake. It was a sacred place for couples to date. If there was nothing to do, they could even go boating. The school's aquatic activities and projects were all carried out here. The training ground was connected to the land and the water, and it was very wide. For students who cultivated water-related spells, it was the best choice in school. It was about half an hour's walk from the center of the academy. It would take more than 10 minutes to move with the unique curse vessel train in the academy. The distance could only be said to be neither too far nor too close. It was similar to the suburbs, and it was similar to the various dormitory areas. There were no convenient attributes. The last one, the manor in the mountain, was not worth mentioning. The location was close to the edge of the academy. It could be said to be relatively remote. It took a few hours to walk from the center of the academy. Even if one took the curse vessel train, it would take an hour to get there. The transportation was very inconvenient. But in contrast, the whole building was quite magnificent. The interior decoration was also very luxurious. It was said that it was built during the heyday of the great aristocrats of Austin in the past. The training ground was quite large. Of course, these attributes were all secondary. What really gave this building an advantage over the other two was the mountain where the manor was located. To put it simply, this mountain had a secret realm. Watcher Valley. This was a special secret realm that could only be entered near the mountain forest like Demon's Night. However, unlike the completely safe Demon's Night, this secret realm, which seemed to have a much milder name, was actually dangerous, but the probability was relatively low. Every time Watcher Valley opened, the team that entered would be forced to apply a special life-binding curse. Unless everyone died, they would be forcibly petrified when they were fatally injured. They would become a watcher waiting for their teammates to rescue them. In this case, after eliminating the monster, they would be pulled out of the secret realm to remove the petrification. But if the entire team was wiped out or stayed in the secret realm for more than 3 days, then the petrification would be automatically lifted. The person who was fatally injured would basically die. In general, this secret realm was not very dangerous. As long as there was a person at the entrance who could escape at any time to report the news, they could more or less avoid being wiped out. But occasionally, people who entered would go too far, or like the victims in the records, were buried because the terrain changed during the battle and could not be found. Then they would really be dead. For a long time, because of this reason, Watcher Valley had not been included in the practical teaching of the academy. After all, losing a battle in this secret realm was equivalent to going missing. A few small teams would be fine, but if thousands of people were scattered all at once, hundreds of people would go missing. Even if the search and rescue team knew the location, they would be exhausted to death. It was certainly not possible to use it on a large scale, but it was still barely usable for the actual combat of a small elite team. After all, if they wanted to engage in actual combat, they would have to follow the mentors or ringbearers on missions. In that case, there was no guarantee that they would be in danger. Such 3 options were placed in front of Luoya. For a time, he was quite hesitant. But as the saying goes, you can't have your cake and eat it too. After careful consideration, Luoya decided to choose the manor with the secret realm. There were 3 main reasons for choosing this place. The first and most important reason was that Luoya had analyzed the composition of his faction members. As a noble of the Saint Mestre theocracy, Luoya was originally the second in command of the Nua Ire group. Normally, he should be managing the faction on behalf of Her Royal Highness. But now that he had become an ring-bearer, he naturally could not work for Miss Angel. After all, ring-bearers were equal in name. But even if he did not work for them, he could not poach from the corner of the Saint Mestre theocracy. Similarly, the elites of Rose were under the jurisdiction of the two girls. So after careful consideration, Luoya targeted the local civilians, the children of merchants, and the lower-born nobles. This group could be said to be the most hard-working group in the St. Freya Academy. Most of them did not have anything to inherit after graduation. So they entered the academy to improve themselves. As a person who had been forced to constantly improve himself from a young age, Luoya was very willing to provide a channel for these hard-working people. Of course, Luoya was not a pure Mr. Nice Guy. The second reason he chose this place was to recruit a group of talents for Akot Hill. After all, these students who did not have the inheritance of their ancestors needed to find a job after graduation. And as the acting lord of his own territory, Luoya could directly make the decision to recruit people without any notice. The third reason was the problem of the secret realm. As a secret realm, the Watcher Valley was not completely safe. There were many problems, but the main problem was that it was difficult to find people. But this problem was not a problem for Luoya because he had the help of Paitila. Where were the people buried? The search and rescue team could not find them, but how could the Mother Earth not find them? The most difficult problem to solve in the Watcher Valley was not a problem for Luoya at all. Because of this, Luoya chose it. On the other hand, Luoya was also full of interest in the existence of the secret realm. After making a clear choice, the academy began to send special staff to clean and renovate the building. It would take about half a month. Luoya did not need to care about this. It was better to say that he was busy with other things now. Yesterday at the Broken Sword Tavern, Luoya, who chose not to interfere, drank a lot with Chris. After re-examining the character of this mentor, he finally came to the conclusion that Chris was really a very pure person. Whether it was liking or disliking, Chris never hid it. Generally speaking, he was the same on the surface. It was just that he had developed some bad habits after so many years of being heartbroken, such as smoking when he was anxious. But compared to that, he had more advantages. The most obvious one was his attentiveness. In order to let Luoya catch up with his classes as soon as possible, he even found a senior to tutor him. In St. Freya's Academy, after choosing a mentor, they would have to attend the mentor's class. However, unlike the other majors, the mentor's class was attended by students of all grades. The content of the class differed according to the mentor, and among them, Chris's classroom was famous for its high difficulty. If there was no help, even if Luoya had a certain foundation, it would probably take him half a year to gradually integrate into the class. But if there were senior students to tutor him, it would be a different story. Chapter 263. Inside the classroom, the black-haired girl calmly agreed to her tutor's request without any fluctuations in her heart. This wasn't Lillian's first time as a remedial teacher. Last year, as the representative of the second grade, Lillian was the most outstanding student in Chris' classroom, to give remedial lessons to the first grade female students. They were the same tutor, but this special relationship fluctuated according to the number of students in St. Freya Academy. The difference was huge. For example, Tutor Freelay, who had the most students, was naturally not bad at teaching. But the most important reason why the number of students far exceeded others was actually because his exams were simple. Failing in exams was not only a nightmare for students in Luoya's previous life, but also a burden that students in St. Freya Academy could not bear. There were two main reasons. One was to spend money, and the other was to quit school. Failing exams naturally meant retaking classes, and retaking classes naturally meant repaying fees. Whoring for free. Haha. That did not exist. Not only that, in order to leave a deep impression on the students, the tuition fee for retaking classes was doubled. Double the tuition fee for St. Freya Academy was not a small sum of money. As for quitting school, it was even simpler. Every year, failing more than 5 compulsory and elective classes would directly be judged by the academy as passive and neglectful. If they failed the makeup exam again at the beginning of the semester, they would immediately be expelled from the academy. Under such a strict system, there were many students quitting school every year. As the first grade who had just entered the academy, the probability of quitting school was the highest among all the grades. At this time, there was a tutor who often used the same questions in class for his exams. This kind of caring and warmth was undoubtedly touching. In Luoya's previous life, this kind of person was called a living bodhisattva, but in Shiye's St. Freya Academy, he was called the Light of Salvation, Freyle. Every year, Tutor Freyle's classes had a few hundred students, but the demand did not meet the demand. Every year, students were madly snatched up, and the student quota could even be sold at a high price on the black market. However, there were also corresponding pros and cons. The students who gathered under this tutor would definitely not fail his classes, but there was basically no camaraderie to speak of. Everyone was here to freeload points. Who could differentiate between the hundreds of people? If they bumped into each other and found out that they were from the same sect, they would at most praise their teacher together, and that would be it. The Freely classroom was the representative of the large classrooms, and the students were generally indifferent to each other. The Chris classroom, on the other hand, was on the other end of the spectrum. It only nurtured the cream of the crop, and the exam was extremely difficult. There were even cases where all the students failed and had to retake the exam. However, every year, there would be a few outstanding graduates. Ever since Chris had graduated, he had been teaching at the school for a total of 18 years, but he had taught more than 100 outstanding graduates. This kind of proud result was because of the high difficulty of teaching and the strict examination. There was no doubt that compared to the relaxed and happy environment of the Freely classroom, the Chris classroom was under a lot of pressure. In the many years of teaching, there had been students who could not bear the pressure and even held grudges. However, when these people entered society, they would come back to thank their strict tutor for their hard work, whether it was because of the huge benefits they had received or because they had escaped a disaster. To a certain extent, the laziness now would be the suffering in the future. This was the life philosophy that the graduates had comprehended. For the students in the school, it was normal for them to help each other in the face of such a difficult exam. In addition, there were very few students in the Chris classroom, and there were only a few students in each batch. Therefore, the camaraderie between the students was very deep. One of the reasons why Lillian chose Chris as her tutor was that Chris, who came from the country of scholars, had a neutral stance and would not try to curry favor or be hostile toward others. The other reason was that she had taken a fancy to his strict teaching and huge and vibrant connections. One must know that Chris had trained 100 outstanding graduates in less than 20 years. The earliest batch was only in their early 30s and had yet to reach the prime of their lives. It could be said that each and every one of them had great potential, and as time passed, their influence would only grow. Even for a princess like Lillian, such a group of people was a huge resource of connections. The situation in the Austin Empire had gotten worse in recent years, and no one could predict what would happen in the future. It was necessary to accumulate strength in case of any accidents. Of course, this was Lillian's original intention. However, after 2 years of studying, Chris had become one of her rare friends, and the two of them had a good relationship. Therefore, Lillian agreed without much thought when Chris asked her to tutor the first-year students this year. Are there a lot of students this year? No, I only took in one this year. Is that so? And it's a girl? No, it's a boy this time. The red-haired woman was a little embarrassed when she said that. Lillian frowned slightly at her words. Although it sounded a little narcissistic, Lillian had been with boys for a long time, and the boys would always confess to her. The previous batch of students were all girls, so Lillian's tutoring went smoothly. However, it was a boy this time, and this situation was a little troublesome. Perhaps Chris sensed the black-haired girl's thoughts, so she helplessly added, "I can't help it. That boy's talent is too high, and I don't think the others are up to the task. Actually, I wanted to do it myself, but that would seem too biased and unfair to everyone." I see. Besides, in terms of identity as Rose, You're more suitable. Wait. The black-haired girl's eyes narrowed slightly when she noticed something wrong with Chris's words. Before she could ask, there was a knock on the classroom door. The next moment, the door was pushed open, and a young man in a cloak and scarf greeted the tutor as he removed his equipment. Teacher Chris, you're here? This is the… You are. Luoya's greeting came to an abrupt halt when she saw the familiar face. After realizing the identity of the newcomer, the black-haired girl widened her eyes and stood up. The two of them looked at each other, and the rings on their hands shone under the light. They looked at each other in silence. Chapter 264. In the silent classroom, Luoya Akit and Lillian Akit sat side by side, 2 seats apart from each other. Teacher Chris stood in front and looked at the silent and strange combination. He didn't know what to do. That shouldn't be the case. Luoya just entered the school, and he shouldn't have come into contact with Lillian for the past week. Why are the two of them so cold to each other? It's as if there's a grudge between them. The red-haired woman was puzzled. Chris naturally didn't know that the first thing Luoya did after entering the school was to have a game with Lillian. However, what she didn't know was that while she was confused, Luoya was even more confused. At this moment, the black-haired young man's mind was blank. There was only one question echoing in his mind. Question: how do I get along with the target that the ancestor has decided to make pregnant? Waiting online. It's quite urgent. The black-haired young man's head went numb. If it was before entering the secret realm, Luoya would at least know when to advance and retreat when he saw Lillian. But now, as soon as he saw Lillian's face, he couldn't help but think of Roy's reminder when he patted him on the shoulder. It's fine if I make her pregnant, but to do it behind her back? Thinking of Luoya, this scumbag couldn't help but feel guilty. He always felt that he was planning a crime. Without the moral high ground, his momentum naturally weakened. Because Luoya had been hiding for the past week, and it was impossible for him to change his teacher, he didn't properly collect information about Professor Chris's class. Now the sudden change caught him off guard. Luoya, whose mind was filled with the gift from the ancestor, was so embarrassed that he couldn't say a word. On the other side, the black-haired girl was thinking more. Is he doing it on purpose? Lillian thought about this question. Although she didn't move, her eyes gradually sharpened. As the princess of the Austin Empire, in terms of reputation, Lillian was definitely the representative of Chris's classroom. If Luoya applied for Chris as a teacher, it was impossible for him not to know that she was here. But his reaction when he entered the classroom. The girl recalled Luoya's stunned expression, and shook her head slightly in her heart. At that moment, the young man's reaction didn't seem to be fake. Lillian was very sure of this. In other words, it's a coincidence? If that's the case, to a certain extent, it might be a good thing. In the current first year of St. Freya Academy, Nua Iyer of the Theocracy and Xia Luot of Rosset had both become ringbearers. But it had to be said that these two parties were naturally hostile to Lillian of the Austin Empire. From a safe point of view, the two parties should avoid meeting each other except during the Rose Council meeting. But Luoya was different. Luoya was indeed a noble of the Theocracy of St. Maester, but he wasn't a member of the central government. Instead, he was a local noble and didn't have a direct conflict with the Austin royal family. Besides, he had a good relationship with the other two ringbearers of the first year. As a bridge of communication, or rather a buffer, it couldn't be better. Most importantly, if she were to reject the tutoring mission now, it would be equivalent to showing a cowardly attitude. Lillian couldn't afford to show weakness like this. Besides, speaking of cowardly, how could a teacher possibly do that now? Say, do you two know each other before? After holding it in for a long time, Chris finally couldn't help but ask about the situation between the two. As soon as the words left his mouth, the two shook their heads. Not really, we've only met once before. It's not so much a meeting. It's better to say that it's a matter of position. Lillian said so in a cold voice. Her purple pupils were emotionless. She was still wary of Luoya's contact with Paul, but Chris, who didn't know about these things, didn't care so much. If that's the case, how about introducing yourselves to each other first? You two will be in the same classroom in the future. Although it's a little self-deprecating, I'm afraid that our classroom won't be able to recruit many people in the future. Besides, you two will definitely have to interact with each other, even if it's not with me. Huh? What do you mean? Luoya was a little puzzled after hearing the teacher's words, while Lillian's eyes flickered and remained silent. Chris raised his eyebrows slightly and explained. If I remember correctly, you're both of the creation branch, right? Creation branch? No, I'm from the summoning branch. Yes, you're from the summoning branch when you sign up, but the actual combat teaching is independent. It can be regarded as a branch of the summoning branch. It's a special branch that has been independent from the summoning branch in recent decades. It's specially set up for people with special circumstances like you. The black-haired boy was stunned for a while after listening to Chris's words. According to this sage teacher, the summoning branch seemed to be related to his bloodline ability, but in fact, the relationship was quite limited because the definition of the word summon was more similar to transportation. It was the most common situation of the summoning branch to transport existing things to the side through the method of summoning. Therefore, the things they summoned were already existing, whether it was summoning fire spirits or undead spirits. It was the same principle. But Luoya's situation was different. He was more similar to summoning the soul or consciousness of an ancient existence, and using curse power to construct a body according to the soul in the present world to fight. In other words, he was creating something out of nothing. That was why it was named the creation branch. And unlike the summoning branch, which did not require the use of curse power after the summoning, Luoya's supply of curse power could not be stopped during the process. Once the supply was stopped, the body constructed by Luoya's curse power would disintegrate because it could not bear the powerful souls of Gulandair and the others. Chris grasped the key points and explained in a few sentences, which made Luoya suddenly enlightened. He finally understood where the dissonance in his heart came from, but then a new question emerged. Lillian is also from the creation branch. Chapter 265. In the empty classroom, Luoya leaned against the table and sighed helplessly as he watched Lillian leave through the door. After a series of communications, Luoya had basically confirmed that Lillian didn't want to have a good relationship with him and wanted to keep a distance from him instead. Regarding this situation, Luoya was honestly a little puzzled. In his communications with Lillian, he had always felt a faint sense of inconsistency. For example, the reasons Lillian gave seemed reasonable, but on the other hand, there were also many benefits to maintaining a good relationship with Luoya. Although it was normal for people to consider problems from different perspectives, Luoya still felt that it was impossible for someone as intelligent as Lillian to not have thought of it. Could it be that something interfered with her choice? Luoya thought so and shook his head after a moment. These groundless guesses weren't what he needed to do now. In fact, he still had a lot of things to do. The Ring of the Black Rose was an inheritance that Luoya received from his ancestors. It was also the culprit that allowed his guiding spirit to grow to a diameter of 5 meters. But it had to be said that Luoya hadn't worn the ring in the week since he received it. Being chased by a group of old men every day, Luoya was really worried that someone who recognized the ring would see it. And according to Roy, the Ring of the Black Rose would give guidance, which was undoubtedly a problem. What exactly was the so-called guidance? Luoya didn't know, so after weighing the pros and cons, he decided to study it in detail after he got his own territory. The sound of students' footsteps gradually increased in the corridor outside the door. The noise made Luoya interrupt his thoughts and walk out of the classroom. Chris chose this time before the morning class to let Luoya meet Senior Lillian. After accomplishing this goal, it was naturally time for class. The classes in the first half of the first year were relatively basic and mostly academic. The main purpose was to cultivate the students' learning habits and abilities. For example, Luoya's first class in school was mathematics, which reminded him of the advanced mathematics classes in university in his previous life. But the difficulty of the class and the classroom couldn't be compared at all. There was no doubt that the difficulty of the courses was relatively simple compared to his previous life, but the classrooms were truly imposing. Most of the teaching buildings in St. Freya's Academy were made of stone with hundreds of years of history, But because they were well maintained, they did not look old. The academic classes were arranged in a staircase model, and the windows had plenty of natural light, so it was exceptionally bright. The seat was made of a single piece of wood. The wood used was warm wood from the Austin Empire. It was a kind of tree that contained curse power that could adjust the temperature. Regardless of whether the outside world was cold or warm, it wouldn't be affected too much. Chairs made of this kind of wood were the same. It wasn't too hard to sit on, and it was quite comfortable. It was one of the specialties of the Austin Empire. In addition, there were reliefs with a long history, exquisite chandeliers, soft carpets, incense burners that exuded a delicate fragrance, and all kinds of aristocratic items could be seen everywhere. It completely subverted Luoya's impression of a traditional school. He also understood why St. Freya's Academy was called an aristocratic school, and why the tuition was so expensive. For example, the incense burner not only looked beautiful, but it was also a curse vessel. The burning incense was also specially made, and had the effect of refreshing the mind. Many other parts in the classroom were the same. They were all curse vessels that were beneficial to learning. To be honest, Roja felt that it would be very difficult to fail in this kind of classroom. With so much gold and silver, he was afraid that even a pig who knows how to speak could pass the passing line. Is this the power of money? I love it, I love it. Luoya looked around the classroom and said to himself. As a person who went to school almost all his life in his previous life, Luoya had a small habit. He liked to sit in the last row in class because he didn't like the feeling of a group of people looking at him from behind. It made him feel insecure. Of course, he knew that this was actually an illusion. After all, everyone looked at the teacher and the mobile phone in class. The latter might be more common. But in St. Freya's Academy, Luoya knew that this was not an illusion. It was better to say that until now, wherever he went, he was in a state of being watched. Feeling that many students in front of him deliberately looked back, Luoya sighed helplessly. He had no good way to deal with this situation at present. He could only let time dilute the students' curiosity. Fortunately, as it was the first class at St. Freya's Academy, the freshmen still attached great importance to it, and their attitude in class was generally very serious. Because there were too many freshmen, a basic subject like mathematics was divided according to the student's teacher. For example, as a student of teacher Chris, Luoya, who was alone, attended the class with the largest number of students. Freely classroom. It was also because of this that Nua Iyer and Xia Luo were not by his side. The two girls' respective retinue of noble elites followed them to become the students of the same teacher. They were Catherine Classroom, of the St. Mestre Theocracy, and Laura Classroom, of the Rose Business United Nations. Catherine Classroom. S specialty was ritualistic curses, including healing, purification, and many other fields. At first glance, it was clear that they had a close relationship with the Holy See. Teacher Catherine West was the daughter of the head of one of the 5 major noble families in the theocracy, the Marquis West family. It was basically impossible for her to have any crooked thoughts, and their relationship could be said to be quite solid. Laura Classroom was the strongest classroom for astrology and prophecy curses. The most famous thing was probably the accurate prediction of the Great Storm in the Scholar Country a few decades ago. The Supreme Council responded and made adjustments accordingly, greatly reducing the casualties and property losses of the people. As for Laura herself, she was even more reliable, and her surname was Sorofia. Teacher Laura was, strictly speaking, Xia Luo's great-aunt. In Rose, she was also a well-known representative of the Sorofia family. It was naturally reassuring for such a person to teach their own juniors. Since then, the 3 first-year ring-bearers had been assigned, and Luoya had no fate with the 2 girls in the academic class. It was impossible for the situation of the local tyrant holding the central leader hostage during the opening ceremony. Nua Iyer and Xia Luo were naturally unwilling to have such an assignment, but considering the problem of distraction during class, they didn't say anything. After all, as the heirs of 2 countries, Nua Iyer and Xia Luo came to school with a mission and purpose. At the very least, they couldn't have bad grades, so it was necessary for them to pay attention in class. Although there was a gap due to different natural learning abilities, If one wanted to be a top student, they had to put in some effort, especially in St. Freya Academy. Even geniuses like Nua Ayer and Xia Luo could be overtaken if they slacked off. Of course, Luoya liked this assignment the most. After all, when he thought of Nua Ayer's little tricks in class, Luoya felt his brain heat up. Miss Angel seemed to have awakened a new sadist attribute recently. She liked to secretly do some shameful things in public to observe Luoya's reaction. Every time she saw Luoya's frightened face, she would get excited. Xia Luo wasn't far behind. She could always come up with some strange ideas, such as the groundbreaking concept of couple outfits in this world. She even wanted to design it herself. Although the outfits weren't out yet, Luoya could already imagine the chaos that would occur if Nua Ayer found out. After school started, Nua Ayer and Xia Luo each had their own private building and training ground. More and more students were wearing the golden rose and red rose insignia on their chests. Luoya didn't have ready-made troops like the theocracy and Luoya, so he had to recruit from scratch. Fortunately, Luoya's reputation was out there, so it wasn't difficult to recruit people. After a morning of classes, Luoya finished his lunch and left the central campus. According to the schedule from a week ago, Luoya's mountain manor, Sangji Hall, was more or less ready to live in. After an hour of bumpy ride, the youth arrived in front of the blue-themed building for the first time. Overall, the scale of this mountain secret realm exceeded Luoya's expectations. From the spacious entrance to the courtyard, to the fountain, to the size and luxury of the main building, Luoya was very satisfied. As its backyard, the secret realm of MT Mist was rich in resources. It was more than enough to hunt for wild animals. Under the guidance of the staff, Luoya walked through the corridor that was decorated in a traditional style. It had a luxurious style unique to the second era of the Austin Empire. Luoya's heart was filled with the joy of freeloading. After a general tour of the building and confirming the location, Luoya began to consider the recruitment of faction members, which was the problem of people. Although there was a bit of suspicion of cheating, Luoya actually had information about the future of many people in the game. Therefore, to a certain extent he could be targeted. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry. After thinking for a while, night fell. After tasting the cooking of Sangji Hall, Luoya felt that it was passable. He silently looked at the black ring in his hand in the spacious master bedroom. Chapter 266. This is. The moment the black-haired youth opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the dusky sky. A cold breeze blew on his body, and the sound of trees swaying in the wind echoed in his ears. Luoya felt the hard ground without any softness under his body. His golden pupils were filled with confusion. He turned his head slightly to the left and right, and found that there was nothing around him. So cold. This isn't a dream? The youth who was awakened by the cold shivered slightly. The overly realistic touch made Luoya keenly feel that something was wrong. He sat up and found that he seemed to be on a rooftop. His slightly higher vision allowed him to see something familiar. It was the top part of a building with a pointed roof. It looked like a tall tower, and it should have been built a few hundred years ago. The reason why Luoya recognized it was very simple. It was because it was one of the candidates for the headquarters of the Green Rose sect, the tower in the center of the academy. When he saw this building, Luoya finally woke up completely. He suddenly got up and ran to the edge of the rooftop. He looked down at the vast campus in front of him, and was stunned for a moment. What's going on? Am I kidnapped again? No, that's impossible. The overly bizarre thought only lasted for a moment before it was rejected by Luoya. Not to mention the possibility of being unknowingly taken out of the mountains to the center of the campus as a four-source level extraordinaire. The main point was that Luoya had Gulandair and Paytila by his side. Although Gulandair and Paytila usually stayed in their own spaces, and occasionally seemed to visit each other, the passage between them and Luoya was always connected. Unless it was a close relationship like Nua Ayer or Xia Luot. If anyone wanted to do anything to Luoya while he was asleep, the two ancient gods would definitely discover it. Once there was danger, they would even urgently use Luoya's curse power to forcefully appear. It was completely impossible for him to be taken away by some inexplicable person. and left on the rooftop to be blown by the wind. Did this mean that there was something special going on? Could it be that the Nua Iyer wanted to come to the rooftop to play with him? No matter what, this is still Luoya, who had no clue, shook his head and stopped the dirty thoughts in his mind. He decided to contact the huge skeleton and Mother Earth. However, in the next second, Luoya's face suddenly turned ugly. How could this be? The black-haired youth widened his eyes in disbelief. Could it be that the passageway was gone? In the 5 years since he had obtained the crown, origin substance and met the Gulandair, this was the first time that Luoya had been unable to contact the ancient gods in a non-historical situation. Could it be that we're currently in a historical episode? Did I accidentally trigger something? Luoya muttered to himself and forced himself to calm down. However, after thinking about it seriously and sensing the origin substance for a while, he still rejected this possibility. As Luoya's bloodline ability, he could clearly sense it once it was activated. Moreover, even in a historical episode, the passageway of the ancient gods would only be temporarily blocked by the new ancient gods, just like Paitila back then. However, the passageway had now disappeared as if it had never appeared. This also represented an extremely terrifying matter. Luoya could no longer borrow the power of the ancient gods, even if it was only a weakened version of their bodies. Calm down, the ability of the origin substance cannot be changed. In reality, it's impossible for me to lose the ability to summon the Gulandair and the others. Therefore, by inference, this isn't reality. Is it a dream or something else? The reason for this appearance, is it because of the ring? Luoya pinched the space between his eyebrows as he analyzed. He remembered that before going to sleep he did not take off the black rose ring. Connecting this to Roy's words earlier, could this be the so-called guidance? The black-haired youth looked down at St. Freya Academy in the middle of the night. It was already past midnight, and the bustling campus during the day was now deathly silent. Specks of light dotted the huge buildings, but not only did it not give off a feeling of brightness, it made other places seem even darker. Quiet, too quiet. Such a thought appeared in Luoya's mind, and the youth suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. The dark campus, the absence of the ancient gods, and the strange silence all gathered together raised Luoya's vigilance to the extreme. He glanced behind him, and saw that the door leading to the rooftop was wide open. The wooden door swayed left and right in the wind, but it was completely dark inside, as if it was the mouth of a beast that came out of nowhere. I have to take a look. Such a thought appeared in Luoya's mind. Chapter 267. Dear, did you not sleep well last night? At noon, the reddish-brown-haired girl looked at the black-haired boy across the table and asked. Luoya, who was pinching his eyebrows, looked up and stared at Xia Luo's emerald eyes. After hesitating for a moment, he nodded slightly. Something like that. Last night, I had a nightmare. A nightmare? Well, some weird nightmares. The black-haired boy replied with a smile, and turned to look at the scenery below. At this time, Luoya and Xia Luo were at the tallest restaurant in the academy, the Clear Sky Tower. It was located at the edge of the commercial street. It was said that it used to be a weather observation tower, but it was later converted into a luxurious restaurant. The entire restaurant was extremely high-end. There were no seats in the tower, only 4 tables with 8 seats on 4 balconies. They only provided lunch and dinner, which meant that they could serve up to 16 people a day. Although they only served a small number of people, the revenue of the Clear Sky Tower could be ranked in the top 3 among the high-end restaurants in St. Freya Academy. From this, one could see how expensive it was. But correspondingly, this place also had its own unique selling points, such as the scenery overlooking the academy and the top chefs of the scholars' country. Unfortunately, if it was yesterday, Luoya would have enjoyed Xia Luo's kindness. But today, looking down at the campus at noon, Luoya had a strange feeling. He could not help but recall what it looked like at night. Last night's nightmare brought too many questions to Luoya. The empty academy in the dark, the creepy black-clothed clergy, the whispers in front of the bed, and the empty bed. Until he woke up, Luoya had no clue about all of this, especially after he found that he did not have the side effect of the frozen earth. He could not even determine the nature of this nightmare. Was it the guidance of the Black Rose Ring? Or was it just a simple nightmare? If it was the so-called guidance, then what did it want Luoya to do? Was it looking for clues? Or fighting those strange monsters? The academy below was bustling with people coming and going, but in his dream, it was deathly still. This strong contrast made Luoya feel a little absent-minded, but before he could recover, a pair of hands had already touched his cheeks. "Darling, what's wrong with you?" "Huh." Luoya raised his eyes and discovered that Xia Luot had unknowingly walked in front of him. Her emerald eyes gazed at him with some worry. Sensing the girl's worry, Luoya hurriedly adjusted his state and opened his mouth to explain. I didn't sleep well last night, and the tutor's class in the morning was a little difficult. So that's how it is." "Indeed, Teacher Chris's lessons are known for their difficulty. I can't help you in this regard." The reddish-brown-haired girl said as she sat on Luoya's lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. Luoya blushed when he felt the warmth and softness on his body, but he didn't resist. After all, this scene was nothing compared to last year when they shared a bed together. "However, I might be able to help with nightmares." Nightmares? That's right. There's a lot of dream content in astrology and prophecy. This can be considered my field," the girl said as she blinked her eyes. Hearing this, Luoya came to a realization. The young lady observed the flickering eyes of the boy, and suddenly reached out her hand to cover his eyes. "Don't move. This is a curse to dispel nightmares." Is that so?" The reddish-brown-haired girl said this lie with a serious expression. Luoya, who thought that this girl was a professional, closed his eyes in relief. However, to the boy's surprise, what he waited for wasn't a curse, but a touch of warmth on his lips. "Xia Luot? Yes, this is a blessing kiss curse. The effect should be quite good. If you still have nightmares today, come and find me tomorrow." The young lady who successfully stole a kiss was very calm when facing Luoya's doubtful gaze. She was as kind as a nurse who gave instructions to a patient after giving him an injection. Luoya looked at such a girl, and the questioning words were stuck in his mouth. Could it really be a blessing? But there didn't seem to be any reaction from the curse just now. Could it be related to astrology? Wait a minute. By the way, Xia Luot, there's something I want to ask you. Is there a place similar to this in the astrology department's building? Similar to this? Yes, it's a place with a wide view overlooking the campus. It should be something like a rooftop. Chapter 268. Lillian Aikman's and Luoya's tutoring was, to a certain extent, a confidential matter. There were many reasons to keep it a secret. For example, the identity of the two of them. A princess of an empire giving tutoring to a noble was not right. And from the point of view of a ring-bearer, once it was made public, it would make Roja feel like he was under Lillian. After all, Luoya was going to form his own team. Now that his boss was Lillian's student, would the Blue Rose faction still be able to raise their heads in front of the Purple Rose's security department in the future? Of course, there were more practical problems. For example, Nua Iyer and Xia Luot would object. From Lillian's perspective, this matter violated Emperor Lucas's inexplicable order, so of course, it could not be made public. Both sides had similar problems, so it could be said that they hit it off in terms of confidentiality. But it had to be said that Lillian was really good at irritating people. For example, this secret code to open the door. Teacher's mission? What the hell is that? Lillian had to repeat this secret code once every tutoring session as if telling Luoya not to think too much about it. Of course, the young man strongly opposed it, but as the saying goes, the situation was stronger than the person. Her Royal Highness meant what she said. Luoya was speechless for a long time, but he could only ignore her and secretly slander her in his heart. Hee, do you think you are the only one with a mission? This is my ancestor's mission. After comforting himself fiercely in his heart, Luoya pushed open the heavy door and entered the classroom. He saw Lillian standing in front of the podium. Today, the black-haired girl was wearing a simple black Aston-style dress. The long dress covered her legs and had a corset design that outlined her waistline. Because it was a simple dress, her chest was not very tight. Instead, it set off her waist and made her look very full. The small bow tie on her chest embellished it, making her look playful and cute. The girl who had changed into a new dress stunned Luoya, and he could not help but take a few more glances. Although Lillian was too cold to him, she was still very pleasing to the eye. Especially when he saw her flat belly, Luoya's heart skipped a beat. He inexplicably thought of Roy's words. Wait. What am I thinking? Luoya, whose brain overheated, hurriedly averted his gaze, walked to the first row, and sat down. He looked at Lillian on the podium, and was speechless again. Normally, students would sit side by side during one-on-one tutoring as it was more convenient to be closer to each other. However, it was obvious that Lillian didn't want to sit next to Roja. So this tutoring session was really like a teacher and a student. Roja couldn't say anything about this and could only accept it. However, unlike what he imagined, although Lillian was indifferent to him, her teaching was very serious, and she was more meticulous than Roja expected. Luoya thought that a genius like Lillian would also teach the stream of consciousness. After all, it was natural for most geniuses to do things that others could not do. But to his surprise, Lillian turned out to be a rigorous academic. Her understanding of all kinds of knowledge was on point. Luoya even felt that she was better than teacher Chris to a certain extent. The things that he did not understand during the day gradually became clear under the girl's explanation. Luoya was enlightened. At the same time, he could not help but believe in the black-haired girl on the podium. It made sense for Chris to get Lillian to tutor him. Her lectures were indeed good. When the two of them explained the same problem from different perspectives, the effect was no longer as simple as 1 + 1. Instead, it broadened Luoya's horizons. In this high-density, compressed biscuit-like learning, Luoya's expression gradually became serious. Lillian, on the other hand, was still the same. Her face was as cold as ever. If Luoya were not sitting there, he would have thought that she was teaching the air. Wait, she doesn't really treat me like air, does she? Such doubts arose in Luoya's mind. But not long after, Lillian personally dispelled them. About an hour after the lecture was over, the black-haired girl looked at Luoya clearly for the first time. Is there anything else you don't understand? Probably not. Is that so? The black-haired girl nodded slightly after hearing Luoya's words. Just when Luoya thought the class was about to end, Lillian suddenly said, "Give it a try." Huh? What? Give it a try. Spell control line. The black-haired boy looked at the girl in front of him and blinked. For a moment he was in a daze. Not only did she give an explanation, but she even included practice? That's a little responsible. But, recalling the practice during class, Luoya's face stiffened. No matter what, Lillian was a beautiful girl, and extraordinarily beautiful. Male genes would naturally resist showing weakness in front of such a girl. But after looking into the girl's calm eyes for a moment, Luoya sighed and obediently extended his hand. Chapter 269. At night, St. Freya Academy was bustling with activity. People came and went in the business district, and there was a lot of traffic in front of the high-class restaurants. The hormones of both men and women were secreting at an accelerated rate here. However, in the isolated classroom 14 of Zone 1, the atmosphere between a man and a woman was exceptionally stiff. Senior, what do you mean by that? Literally, it's impossible for you to pass this class. The black-haired girl looked at Luoya, who had an ugly expression, and added faintly, I don't know what you've experienced in the past, and I don't want to know, but as a result, your curse power usage habits have been fixed. If you want to control it carefully, you need to completely change your past pattern. This is equivalent to negating all your previous efforts. Lillian's words made Roja's eyes widen in shock. All his efforts in the past weren't as simple as that. Roja's method of using the curse power was practiced, and now it's impossible to do it again. Perhaps she noticed the teenager's thoughts. Lillian was silent for a moment before speaking again. Although you can't control it carefully, your curse power is exceptionally outstanding in terms of explosive power, and you can maintain a stable output at a high frequency. This situation is very rare. But if I can't pass the curse power control class, I can't pass the ring-bearer's extraordinary class. Should I ask Chris to go easy on me because of this? But if that's the case, how am I supposed to behave in the classroom? Luo Ye's expression was heavy, and he was vexed, but he did not expect Lillian's voice to suddenly ring in his ears. It's not like there's no way. Senior? If you can't do something simple, you can learn something more difficult. Curse power control is actually a simplified version of curse power compression control. In terms of actual combat, only endurance is preserved, and the most difficult compression part is abandoned. But for you, this part might be easier, the black-haired girl said as she walked down the podium. The light emitted from her fingertips converged into a thin white line, and she waved her hand at the hemp rope in Luo Ye's palm. The hemp rope was instantly cut into two. It's useless if it's crude. The key is the technique. As Lillian spoke, she stretched out her hand to show Luo Ye the unscathed thin thread. Seeing this, the young man didn't have the time to think about the girl's dirty lines. Instead, he carefully observed the shining silver thread. Compressing it to the extreme will result in a qualitative change. If you can't control the quantity, this is the only way. You can't do it now, so. The black-haired girl looked down at the youth below her. Her voice was calm and cold as she spoke. Extra classes. The most unsatisfactory thing in life was to have more and more remedial classes. In the dark of the campus, Luo Ye sighed and walked out of the teaching building, following the crowd that was returning to the dormitory after self-study. It could be said that Lillian's lesson today had given Luo Ye a blow that was neither too big nor too small. Not only was Luo Ye unable to control his curse power, but more importantly, it was the impact that Lillian had on him. Regardless of whether it was her sharp observation of his curse power that allowed her to infer his experience, or her cutting of the hemp rope with a single thread, they all vividly displayed Lillian's intelligent mind and powerful strength. Although Luo Ye had long known that she was a genius, he still couldn't help but feel that there was a gap between them. However, he had to admit that Lillian's lessons were still beneficial to Luo Ye. The most important thing was that the girl was serious and responsible. This actually touched Luo Ye quite a bit. Before this, he had never thought that Lillian would actually take the initiative to give him extra classes. However, when he thought about the girl's attitude, Luo Ye was speechless, especially when Luo Ye thanked Lillian for teaching him at the end of the class. I've said it before. I'm just doing my duty. I don't need your thanks. I'm only giving you extra classes because your situation is too bad. The black-haired girl calmly turned around and left after saying that. Only Luo Ye, who was supposed to wait in the classroom for 10 minutes according to the arrangement, was left behind. He also didn't know what to do with himself. Just how much does this girl not want to have anything to do with me? Luo Ye, who was pondering over this question, sighed. He couldn't figure out where Lillian's resistance came from. However, no matter what, it was good to have a senior to guide him. Moreover, although Lillian didn't look at him during the lesson, he could still look at her. He had to admit that she was quite pleasing to the eye, especially her waist that contrasted against her chest. Chapter 270. Before midnight, in a restaurant far away from the central campus, Luo Ye's cheeks twitched slightly as he looked at the black-haired boy who was eating and drinking. Since coming to this world for more than 10 years, as a noble heir, Luo Ye had seen many young masters and young ladies, but there were not many who could eat in such a hurry. Looking at the boy who was choking on a chicken leg, Luo Ye even had the illusion that he was taking in a beggar. No, are you here to eat and drink? Chatting while eating, you're eating while I'm chatting? Picking up the glass and taking a sip of wine, Luo Ye looked at the helpless face of young Master Paul, and couldn't help but think of the beauty and elegance of another member of the Arcaren family an hour ago. Although they were both Arcaren, the gap between them was really bigger than a human and a dog. Luo Ye sipped the wine and sighed in his heart, while on the other side, Paul was drinking like a whale. After a while, he put down the glass and gasped for breath, as if he had just come back to life. Brother Luo Ye, thank you for your hospitality. I'm a bit hungry, so my table manners are a bit ugly, sorry. No, so why don't you eat? Actually, I lost my money for food, and I've been hungry for 2 days. Why don't you lose yours too? Wait, no. Luoya looked at the boy who was scratching his face in embarrassment across the table, and suddenly remembered something. He remembered that there was indeed such a plot in Eye of the Recorder. Paul, who had just entered the school, lost his money for food and was hungry for 2 days. He leaned against the wall and was about to faint, but he was found by Xiao Luot, who was passing by. Xiao Luot, who was stopped by the car, recognized Paul. The girl who was supposed to hate Paul sympathized with him and treated him to a meal. Because of this, Paul was deeply grateful, which foreshadowed the following plot. Originally, this incident was the first plot point of Paul and Xiao Luot after their first encounter. Luoya should have interfered, but because there were too many things recently, Luoya forgot about it. But he didn't expect that Paul would come directly to him to eat. They could all be eaten. Realizing the significance of this meal, Luoya widened his eyes and felt better all of a sudden. He waved his hand and ordered several more dishes. He couldn't wait to feed Paul with a month's worth of food today. His eyes became friendlier than ever. It had to be said that this incident was of great significance to Luoya. Normally, in order to prevent Luoya from meeting Nua Iyer and Xiao Luot every few days, Luoya would have to think hard about the plot, and try not to let Paul meet Nua Iyer and Xiao Luot every few days. However, it had to be said that doing so would take up a lot of Luoya's energy, and it would also show that Luoya did not trust the two girls, which made him a little uncomfortable. But now things were different. Luoya was not moving, and Paul was fully automatic. There was no need to guard against them. If they had a problem, they would come straight to them. They might even avoid contact with the two girls in the future for the sake of friendship. It could only be said that the facts proved that, excluding the physiological needs, men were still willing to look for men if they had a problem. After all, it was easy to ask between brothers, and there was no unnecessary self-esteem in front of the opposite sex. In order to express his gratitude to Paul, and at the same time to encourage the teenager to look for him if he had a problem in the future, Luoya specially opened a bottle of 30-year-old wine in the cellar. After all, this was a facility of the school, and 30-year-old wine was already the limit. If it was in Akat Hill, he would even be willing to open a 100-year-old Luoya. In the face of such a generous good brother, Paul was very touched. In fact, he didn't really meet Luoya many times, but every time they met, it was at a critical moment, and he gave him a lot of help. Whether it was taking him to school or supporting him in front of the seniors, Luoya never asked for any reward from Paul. He didn't even need his gratitude. Now that he came to freeload, Luoya not only didn't dislike him, but was also very enthusiastic. This made Paul feel emotional for a while, but at the same time he couldn't say his other purpose. "And what's wrong? Is there anything you want to say?" After drinking a glass of wine, Luoya, who sensed that Paul seemed to have something on his mind, blinked and asked. Upon hearing his words, the teenager hesitated. After a long time, he finally mustered the courage to ask Luoya, "Big brother Luoya, I can join your faction?" The sudden request stunned Luoya, and also made the atmosphere in the restaurant tense all of a sudden. Luoya put down the glass of wine and looked carefully at the teenager opposite him. For a moment he couldn't give an answer because one thing was inevitable when talking about Paul, and that was Paul's elder sister, Lillian Aikman. Normally speaking, as someone of the same race, Paul would naturally join Lillian's Purple Rose. But the farce played by the seniors of the Austin Empire when he entered the school seemed to have changed his mind. At that time, many of the people who shouted along with them were students of the Austin Empire, so I feel that joining them is a little... As Paul spoke, an ugly smile gradually appeared on his face. In the end, he couldn't continue and could only laugh. Upon looking at this young man, Luoya knitted his brows and felt that something in his heart was touched. Indeed, as an illegitimate child, Paul's living environment was much worse than Luoya's. Although the Akate family had certain things that other ancient families couldn't compare to and couldn't bear, at least on the surface, Luoya had always been treated well. The Saint Maester Empire was prosperous and stable, and the Akate family's military strength was unrivaled. Due to a certain Huang Shu who had a good relationship with the queen, their territory was vast, and as long as they didn't court death, they wouldn't die. Not only that, but they also had a high status wherever they went. But Paul was different. Although he had reached the standard of a prince, he didn't have the right to inherit the throne. Not only that, but he was also criticized because of his illegitimate identity. His two elder brothers couldn't wait for him to die immediately. As for his elder sister, he didn't know if it was because of Wuxia, but he felt that compared to the game, Lillian's attention wasn't on Paul. Aren't you obsessed with your younger brother? Why don't you want him? Chapter 271. In the bedroom, Wuxia put his cane aside, sat on a chair, and sighed as he looked at the night outside the window. Although he agreed to Paul's request at the dinner table, Wuxia still felt a little guilty when he thought about facing Lillian, who was tutoring him. Isn't it a dead end to snatch a younger brother who has a brother complex? What should I use to compensate her? Wuxia scratched his head helplessly. He could only put these thoughts behind him and go to the bathroom to wash up. Soaking in the warm bathtub, Wuxia stroked the pale blue ring on his hand. His mind was in a mess. Although he refuted Paul's words before, what Wuxia said at the dinner table was also his true thoughts. As a preceptor, he enjoyed the convenience brought by this position and received the admiration of the students. Naturally, he had to pay a price. At least, when he discovered a possible crisis on campus, he should take the initiative to investigate the situation instead of shrinking back. The sense of responsibility in his heart overcame his fear, making Wuxia's will firm. He got up and dried his slender body, walked to the bed with a bath towel, took off the blue rose, silently put on the black rose ring, and then lay on the bed and closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, Wuxia was already in darkness. He poured the power of the curse into his eyes. What he saw was not the gloomy sky from yesterday, but a somewhat unfamiliar ceiling. He got up and scanned the surrounding environment. A soft red carpet, tables and chairs made of warm wood, a podium with some teaching materials, an extinguished incense burner, and a chandelier that was used to enhance the light source, but now it was completely dark. This was everything in the vicinity. It was a small classroom. Wuxia, who found no enemies, breathed a sigh of relief. He raised his hand and looked at the ring in his hand. He was basically sure that this dream was related to the black rose ring. In order to rule out all options, Wuxia went to bed naked. He had nothing on him except for the black rose ring. Fortunately, after entering this dream, his clothes were still his usual clothes, and there was no midnight running scene. The black-haired boy stood up and cast a lightness spell. He then adjusted his breathing and walked towards the door of the classroom. The doors of St. Freya Academy's classrooms were thick and heavy, but they were all high-end goods, so the sound of the door opening was very soft. After carefully listening to the movements in the corridor, Wuxia gently pushed the door open. He looked left and right in the dim corridor, then went to the window to confirm the floor. When he found that he was on the second floor, he thought for a moment and resisted the eerie feeling in the building, and did not directly jump down from the window. Cautiously going down to the first floor, Wuxia glanced at the open door of the teaching building. The night wind blew into the building, and the gorgeous chandelier on the ceiling swayed and produced a tinkling sound. The black-haired youngster looked at the dark corner outside the guardhouse and suddenly froze. The next moment, his pupils suddenly shrank. Someone was there. Wuxia stared at the shadows where the lights in the guardhouse could not reach. Although it was extremely dark, Wuxia could see something moving in the shadows. It was the black-armored soldier from yesterday. The youngster retracted his head and leaned against the wall to adjust his breathing. He analyzed the current situation in his mind. It was obvious that Roja couldn't fight in close quarters with his opponent while he was unarmed. The only thing he could do was to attack with all his strength. Yesterday, Wuxia froze the black-clothed clergy into an ice sculpture. Based on what he saw later, these black-armored soldiers should be the clergy's subordinates. In theory, they should be easier to deal with. After sorting out his thoughts, Wuxia dispelled his fear. After counting down from 3, he rushed out of the staircase and raised his hand to release a ray of cold air. Frozen earth. From rushing out to releasing the skill, Wuxia's movements were as smooth as flowing water. This sudden attack was obviously not within the enemy's expectations. The black-armored soldier was frozen before he could even draw his sword. Seeing this result, Luoya was completely relieved. At the same time, he rushed to the enemy's side. After snatching the enemy's sword, he removed the cold air and stabbed the gap in the armor. At the same time, he let the cold air rush into the enemy's body. After confirming that the enemy was completely unresponsive, Luoya looked around and dragged the soldier's corpse into a nearby classroom. After seeing the black-clothed clergy's glory last night, Luoya was somewhat uncertain about the nature of these damn things. When he discovered that there was an enemy that was alone, Luoya decisively pulled one of them to study. At least he wanted to know what his enemy was. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will be victorious in 100 battles. This was the crystallization of the wisdom of the ancient people in his previous world. And reality proved that Luoya's decision was correct. This guy has 2 hearts? No. This is... Inside the classroom, Luoya held a ruler and picked up 2 connected pieces of flesh stained with black blood. Looking at the green-skinned monster on the ground, he felt a chill down his spine. Reality proved that it was right to be cautious when facing an unfamiliar enemy. Since thawing until now, Luoya had spent more than an hour dissecting the monster. Among them, 1 big and 1 small heart in Luoya's hand was the most representative. If he didn't know that the enemy was a problem, he would most likely be ambushed when he stabbed the enemy's heart and let his guard down. Although it was impossible for these guys to threaten Luoya's life with their strength, but when he thought of the person whose heart was pierced was still moving, he felt a burst of goosebumps. Fortunately, I discovered it in advance. Like I said, I can tell at a glance that you're not human. Wait, this seems to have grown later? After carefully observing for a while under the moonlight, Luoya stared at the smaller heart and narrowed his eyes. He felt that the smaller heart seemed to have been cut off from the bigger one and grew later on. Chapter 272. In the dark corridor, an ingenious persecution was being carried out in an orderly manner. Can't you talk softly? Keep talking. The black-haired teenager was in a place where the light could reach. As he spoke, he constantly struck the iron can in the darkness with his sword. After a few hits, the black-armored swordsman who was hesitating at the boundary of the light and shadow fell to the ground. Then he kicked the black-armored swordsman into the light. To his surprise, the black-armored soldier under the light didn't seem to be affected. It seemed that the light in the guard room only made them not want to come close, but it didn't have any lethality. The teenager sighed and dispelled his dream of being invincible with the light. Then he chopped off the enemy's head. As he knew that these monsters hated the light in the guard room, Luoya simply dragged the corpse under the light. With the help of the light source, he carried out another medical study. The result was that this monster's physiological structure was different from the previous one. It didn't change its mind, but it had an extra liver. I didn't expect it to be a liver emperor. Luoya raised his eyebrows and returned the blood-stained organs to the original owner. Then he observed the body shape and found that the soldier didn't have a Kirin arm. The individual differences are huge. This is a bit difficult to deal with. The black-haired teenager muttered to himself. His gaze gradually became serious. If these monsters were in the same situation, it would be fine. But now, each of them had a strange shape and their weaknesses were different. The only way to deal a fatal blow was to target the hardest part of the brain. After that, Luoya did the same thing and killed another black-armored soldier at the entrance of the teaching building. However, other than further confirming that each of these guys was different, he didn't find anything. He didn't find anything about the monsters, but he did find something about the black rose ring. Why do I feel that the black rose seems to be brighter? Is it an illusion? Or... Luoya looked at the ring after killing 3 black-armored soldiers. He inexplicably felt that the unknown material of the rose was more dazzling under the light. However, before he could study it further, the room's alarm rang again in his ears. Ring ring, ring ring ring, ring ring ring. His body shook slightly. Luoya opened his eyes on the bed and temporarily bid farewell to the dark world. On a sunny morning, Luoya had breakfast at the dining table with Paul, who stayed overnight. Every year, as long as it didn't exceed the stipulated amount, St. Freya Academy could reimburse it. They were indeed rich and overbearing. As for the excess, Luoya, as the acting lord of Akate Hill, had the ability to pay for it. That was why he was able to drink so happily yesterday. It was inevitable that they would taste good when they were eating and drinking legally with public funds. During breakfast, Luoya didn't know why Paul looked at him with eyes full of respect, which made Luoya feel inexplicably uncomfortable, but it also gave him time to reconsider some issues. Luoya carefully considered Paul's matter, and felt that it was necessary to continue the existence of Paul's consulting department in the original work. Although Luoya was beaten to death by the protagonist and the 4 female protagonists, that was only internal strife. In Eye of the Recorder, Paul was able to develop a relationship beyond friendship with so many beautiful girls who were hostile at the beginning. Naturally, it was not by empty words, but by common experiences. Luoya recalled Paul's experience in the game and sighed, but he was unaware of what he had done for so many years. Paul was eating and drinking as usual. His eyes were on his elder brother, but he couldn't guess what he was thinking. The choice in a critical moment reflected a person's nature. As the saying goes, it is easy to change mountains and rivers, but it is difficult to change one's nature. Just like in the ordinary days of life, it is often impossible to see a person's nature. Only in a bad environment and in the face of a crisis can the nature of a person be seen, and who is hypocritical and who is real. And these moments of crisis were simply external factors. Luoya did change a lot of things over the years. Over time, he even changed the power structure of St. Freya Academy. But the good in the game were influenced by him, so how could the villains bow their heads and worship him? Obviously, this was impossible. For example, the 2 clowns who made things difficult for Paul when he entered the school did not change at all. In fact, they were even stronger. And in the entire villain camp, people of this level were not even considered minions. They were completely roadside monsters. Even after Luoya, the original villain boss, cleared his name, the events that Paul would encounter in the future only reduced a part. There were still many difficulties. These difficulties were not only Paul's obstacles, but they would also affect the entire campus and even involve the girls, causing a devastating blow to Luoya's beautiful life. If these external factors were not eliminated, Luoya would not be able to sleep well. In order to get rid of these scum, and in order to show his prophetic advantage of knowing the plot of Recorder's Eye, Luoya had to let Paul restore part of the plot as much as possible. At least, the consultation department as the introduction of various events was indispensable. But unlike the original work, the consultation department, which was originally a miscellaneous department in the academy, would change into the consultation department of the Rose Guild. Paul would be in charge of the specific matters, and Luoya would be in the background. After all, it was an old tradition for the faction members of St. Freya Academy to form or occupy a department. For example, in the game, Xia Luo's Rose Guild occupied the finance department. All the funds for large-scale activities had to be approved by her. Nuwa Ayer's Rose Guild occupied the planning department, responsible for the planning and management of various activities. Originally, Luoya was still hesitating about which department to choose. He did not expect Paul to join him. The 2 could be said to hit it off, and Luoya could be completely relieved through this matter. To be honest, Luoya was very worried about Paul now. The main reason was that without the help of the girls, he was afraid that this little brother would meddle in other people's business and kill himself. If that happened, not only would Luoya's guilt explode, it would also have a great impact on the world. And if he guessed correctly, it should be a negative impact. Chapter 273. Luoya actually didn't know how many people there were in the Creation School, a special branch of the Summoning School. It was better to say that he was busy day and night, and even late at night, so he didn't pay attention to it. But he didn't pay attention to it, but others did. For example, Lillian, as a third-year student, she was very clear about the situation in the Creation School. Today was the first class, but it was basically impossible to avoid Luoya in the future combat practice, so the girl was somewhat resistant to this course. After entering the Summoning School classroom, The black-haired girl went directly to the seat reserved in advance by the Purple Rose school members. More than a dozen Austin nobles surrounded Lillian, so Luoya naturally couldn't get close. And considering the girl's attitude, he would just be asking for trouble if he went over. But what Luoya didn't expect was that he was also surrounded. As a first-year student who got the first place in the history of the entrance ceremony, Luoya was a student of the Creation School. Therefore, this place became a gathering place for people with Luoya as their goal. Sitting in the center of the last row, before he had time to react, there was already a lot of singing and dancing around him. Nice to meet you, Luoya. I am. Luoya, do you have time for lunch later? After becoming a ring bearer, you need people, right? I can help you. Thank you. But sorry, I don't have such plans for the time being. Surrounded by a group of girls, the black-haired boy showed an elegant aristocratic smile on his face, constantly declining the kindness of the nearby girls. On the surface, he was at ease, but in fact he was exhausted. Since a few years ago, Luoya almost didn't deal with girls at aristocratic banquets. The main reason was that Nua Iyer and Ai Lizzie were at the banquets held by the theocracy. The two of them fought fiercely, and other people couldn't get involved at all. In Rose, Xia Luo's family was the dominant one, so it was really a long time ago that he was surrounded by so many girls. Luoya couldn't cope with the excessive number of questions and invitations, which made him understand the importance of faction members for the first time. Sometimes, ring bearers really needed protection. For example, Lillian could attend classes, or do her own things under the protection of her faction members. Meanwhile, Luoya, who was all alone, could only personally deal with these suitors. And it wasn't just ordinary pursuers. There were people with bad intentions, scum girls who wanted to take advantage of him, and green tea girls who liked to seduce men to prove their charm. There were all kinds of people mixed in, making it hard to distinguish between good and bad. After such a torment, Luoya could be said to be physically and mentally exhausted by the time class was over. He was only saved when Nua Iyer came to find him. Miss Angel's pupils shrank when she saw the group of girls surrounding Luoya. The theocracy nobles around her were very self-aware. They didn't need to be ordered to directly swarm forward and use their bodies to block the crowd for Luoya. I say, it's about time for Blue Rose's faction to recruit people. If this goes on, you won't be able to attend classes. Indeed. My apologies, Nua Iyer. You've been a great help. The blonde princess glanced at the dissatisfied vixens and nodded slightly, not taking them seriously at all. As a matter of fact, this motley crew wasn't the reason why she came here. She was only here to see how Luoya was getting along with the other rows. The nearby students came and went. Soon, the black-haired girl walked out of the classroom accompanied by the crowd. Nua Iyer and the others naturally attracted Lillian's attention. Under the gaze of Lillian's purple pupils, Nua Iyer reached out and grabbed Luoya's hand as if declaring sovereignty, using practical actions to show that he was under her protection. But facing this behavior, Lillian didn't say anything. She simply swept a glance at the two of them and shifted her gaze away. Nua Iyer and Lillian were of different grades and didn't know each other, so they didn't intend to greet each other. The two groups brushed past each other. Lillian didn't look at them and seemed to be uninterested in them. Nua Iyer followed her all the way until she disappeared. Luoya, that woman didn't do anything to make things difficult for you, did she? No, not at all. Or rather, she gave him a lot of help. The black-haired young man answered with a guilty conscience. Upon hearing this, Nua Iyer heaved a sigh of relief, held his hand, and revealed a smile. That's good. Then, according to the agreement, you'll accompany me at noon today, right? The princess said. Her blue pupils squinted excitedly as if they were sparkling. Many of the nearby boys saw this and walked away with envious expressions. However, facing the familiar gaze of a predator, the young man's heart inexplicably skipped a beat, and he was instantly alerted. Lunch danger. In the busy streets at noon, Lillian Aikman returned to her residence surrounded by the nobles of Austin. The junior students had to rush to lunch due to schoolwork, but for the senior students who were relatively free and had no classes in the afternoon, it was a good choice to miss the peak of the crowd. As for Lillian, She didn't need to go to the high-class restaurant in the school because the imperial chef of the Austen royal family was in the building under her feet. Among the 3 princes and princesses of the Austen Empire who had the right to inherit, Lillian's identity was particularly noble. Her father was the emperor of the empire, and her mother was born in the Salen family, a duke family that had been passed down from the Second Era. They had been the ruling class since the human migration to the West 1,000 years ago. They were also one of the few great nobles that formed the new Austen Empire. Such an identity was basically the end of the line in the empire that believed in the pure-blood theory. Naturally, she would receive preferential treatment. The imperial chef of the palace was just the tip of the iceberg. However, unlike usual when she ate alone, Lillian's exclusive building, the Linglong Pavilion, welcomed a rare guest today. Chapter 274. The moment Paul voiced his decision, he clearly felt Lillian's gaze tighten. The sudden sense of oppression made him straighten his back and wait to be reprimanded by his royal sister. However, to his surprise, after a long silence, Lillian did not say anything. The black-haired girl stared at the young man opposite her at this time. In fact, her heart was far from being as calm as she appeared on the surface. As a royal princess, Lillian, who was born in the palace, had never experienced much familial affection since she was a child, and she had never had the experience of getting along with relatives younger than her. In her impression, this was the first time a creature like her younger brother had appeared. She should have taken care of him as an elder, but she did not expect Paul to block this path from the very first step. It was fine not to join the Purple Roses faction. It was a wise choice to do so. Although Lillian could not shelter Paul in the name of the organization, it was not a big deal to occasionally help her younger brother, who had no affiliation. With her ability, she could do it. But once Paul joined another faction, the nature of this matter would be different. It was equivalent to Paul taking the initiative to give up Lillian's care and follow an outsider. This matter could cause serious consequences. No matter what, Paul's surname was Ackman. As a member of the royal family, even if he did not have the right to inherit, it was unacceptable for many people in the Austen Empire to submit to an outsider. Not to mention, Luoya was a noble of the theocracy. That person should have considered this matter. Even so, why did he still take Paul in? Is this your choice? Royal sister? I mean, did you take the initiative to ask for this? Yes. I took the initiative to look for Big Brother Luoya yesterday. We haven't seen each other since that incident at the beginning of the semester. I didn't expect him to really agree to take me in. Looking at the touched smile on Paul's face, Lillian frowned slightly. She could not understand Luoya's behavior more and more. But the girl hesitated for a moment, and did not say anything because she knew that she could not change Paul's decision now. If you've really decided to do this, it means that you're ready. Let's not talk about unaffiliated free people for the time being. Among other people's factions, even my security department can't provide you with any help. If this is a trap, you'll have to fight alone, and you'll definitely arouse the strong disgust of some of the nobles in the country. Father might have some ideas, and your environment might be even worse. The black-haired girl calmly talked about the difficulties that Paul might encounter in the future. Hearing this, Paul's face stiffened for a moment. He recalled what Luoya said when she showed him the cyan ring last night. After a moment of silence, he nodded. I believe in Big Brother Luoya. Compared to the goodwill of those fake nobles, I want friends who treat me with sincerity. His Majesty may hate me because of this, but I'm just an illegitimate child who doesn't have the right to inherit. I'm not interested in the throne either. Compared to that, I want a beautiful school life and work hard to become stronger to get closer to the goal in my heart. Paul clenched his fists as the image of the black-haired, golden-eyed young man emerged in his mind. Looking at him, Lillian couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly. Is that so? Lillian let out an undetectable sigh. She gazed at the young man, and was filled with emotions. She also confirmed the fact that Paul was an anomaly in the cold-blooded Ackman family. Unlike his elder brothers who were passionate about pursuing power and status. Even though Paul came from a humble background, He gave Lillian the feeling that he was living seriously. That was a more positive, free-flowing youth, and the pursuit of truth. It was a pure feeling without the smoke of conspiracy and the stench of rotten interests. It was also a way of life that Lillian envied. But it was a pity that Paul didn't choose to get close to Lillian. Otherwise, the girl felt that they might have been able to maintain a good relationship. Since you've made up your mind, I won't keep you any longer. But after all, we're relatives who have origin-substance resonance. If there's any critical situation, as a last resort, you can still look for me. Origin-substance resonance? I understand. Thank you for your kindness, royal sister. Although Paul was puzzled by the so-called origin-substance resonance, he still understood what Lillian was trying to say. The young man who received the promise hurriedly thanked her. The black-haired girl glanced at Paul, and didn't find it strange. After all, Paul had just reached source rank level 5 not long ago. It hadn't been long since he obtained the origin substance, so it was normal that he didn't understand origin substance resonance. After thanking her, Paul, who had finished explaining everything, felt much more relaxed. After finishing his dessert, he bid farewell and left. Walking out of the exquisite and elegant Linglong Pavilion, the young man was filled with emotions. Although royal sister Lillian doesn't like to talk and doesn't have much of an expression, she seems to be a good person. If only she could have a better relationship with big brother Luoya. Paul sighed at the huge difference between the two of them. At the same time, a question arose in his mind. What exactly is origin substance resonance? There should be a feeling of resonance no matter how you think about it. My origin substance is fine every day. When did it ever resonate? Paul frowned in confusion. After thinking for a while, he realized that he had touched on a blind spot in his knowledge. He could only shake his head helplessly and throw this matter to the back of his mind. Forget it. When I have time, I'll ask big brother Luoya. The young man thought so, and left the Black Rose faction's encampment. Luoya had many purposes for entering St. Freya Academy. Learning knowledge, improving himself, making friends, and obtaining academic qualifications. On the surface, he was working hard in every aspect. As for the secret goals, there were even more, such as finding clues about Scholar, the series of events that Paul had caused, and Roy's mission that was basically impossible to complete. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.